It is 3 in the morning and the world is quiet. But in the silent space of a darkened room, a mind is churning like a storm-tossed sea. The only light comes from the cool blue glow of a phone screen, a small portal to a world that seems impossibly distant. On the screen, images scroll by, one after another. A friend's promotion, a stranger's beautiful vacation, a perfect family smiling in a sun-drenched field. With each flick of the thumb, a familiar weight settles deeper into the chest. It is a complex feeling, a mixture of envy, anxiety, and a profound, unshakable exhaustion. It is the feeling of being left behind, of running a race you never signed up for and losing. In the crushing silence of the night, a single thought crystallizes and becomes terrifyingly real. This feeling, this state of being, will last forever. This experience, in its countless variations, is not unique. It is the quiet epidemic of our time, a low-grade fever of the soul that afflicts so many. We live under a constant, unspoken pressure to be more, to achieve more, to have more. We are haunted by a fear of the future, and yet we are often left feeling empty by the very things we thought would bring us happiness. We find ourselves trapped on a relentless treadmill, chasing a horizon that never gets closer, and the resulting spiritual pain, the anxiety, the sense of being stuck, feels like a solid wall, en inescapable prison. We try to break through it with more work, more possessions, more distractions, but the wall only seems to grow thicker. But what if the problem is not the wall itself? What if the problem is that we believe the wall is permanent? What if the source of our suffering is not the challenges of life, but our desperate attempt to cling to certainty in a world that is defined by change? There is an ancient wisdom, a path walked by countless souls before us, that look directly into the heart of this human predicament. This wisdom does not offer a magical escape from the difficulties of life. It does not promise a world without pain or loss. Instead, it offers something far more powerful and far more real, a way to find peace, not by running from life, but by turning to face it with clarity and courage. It begins with the understanding of a single, profound truth, a key that can unlock the door of our self-made prison, a truth that is at once completely obvious and yet endlessly deep. That truth is simply this: nothing lasts forever. To begin this journey, we must return to that quiet room in the deep of the night, to that feeling of being adrift in a sea of anxiety, that sensation of being fundamentally stuck, of a deep and subtle wrongness with the world, has a name. It is a name that comes to us from an ancient language, and it is perhaps the single most important word to understand on this path to peace. The word is dukkha. Often, this word is translated into English simply as suffering, but this translation, while not entirely wrong, is incomplete. It can be misleading. When we hear the word suffering, our minds immediately jump to the most dramatic forms of pain, profound grief, a terrible illness, a devastating loss. And yes, dukkha certainly includes these things. It encompasses the sharp, undeniable agony that life can sometimes bring. But its meaning is far broader, far more subtle, and far more pervasive. Dukkha is not just the raging storm, it is the low grey sky that precedes it. It is not just the loud cry of anguish, but the quiet, constant hum of dissatisfaction that so often runs in the background of our lives. Think of it like a wheel on a cart that is just slightly off-center. The cart still moves forward, it still functions, but with every rotation there is a small, persistent jolt, a subtle wobble, a feeling of unevenness. The journey is never quite smooth. This is dukkha. It is the faint but constant background noise of unsatisfactoriness. It is the feeling of arriving at a goal you worked years for, a promotion, a new house, and in the quiet moment after the celebration, a small voice whispers, "Is this it?" It is the restless urge to check your phone, to refresh your email, to scroll through social media, looking for something to momentarily fill a sense of lack you can't quite name. It is the low-grade irritation of being stuck in traffic. It is the vague sadness that can descend on a Sunday evening as the freedom of the weekend gives way to the obligations of the week ahead. It is the gnawing anxiety that you aren't quite good enough or that the good things you have might be taken away. Dukkha, then, is the entire spectrum of this unease, from the massive tragedies of life down to the tiniest, almost imperceptible feelings of friction between ourselves and the world. It is the human condition of simply never being fully and permanently satisfied. Now, to hear this laid out so plainly might sound grim, it might sound pessimistic, even morbid. But this is the first and perhaps most profound misunderstanding we must set aside. The acknowledgement of dukkha is not a pessimistic statement. It is a courageous one. It is an act of profound realism and deep compassion. Imagine going to a physician when you are feeling unwell. A poor physician might wave away your concerns, telling you to simply think positive thoughts. But a great physician would look at you with kindness, listen to you with care, and say, "I see that you are in pain. Let us be honest about it. Let us understand its nature, so that we may find a way to heal it." This is the spirit of what is known as the first noble truth in Buddhism. It is not a grim proclamation that life is miserable. It is a diagnosis. It is the brave, essential first step of looking squarely at our own experience without flinching and admitting that this feeling of being stuck, this dukkha, is real. It is to stop pretending that everything is fine when it isn't. To stop blaming ourselves for feeling this way as if it were a personal failure or a sign of weakness. The truth is, it is not a personal failure at all. It is a universal experience, and by acknowledging it, we take it out of the shadows of shame and denial and bring it into the light of awareness where it can be worked with. This simple, honest acknowledgement is the beginning of all healing. It tells us that the feeling in the middle of the night is not your fault. You are not broken. You are simply human. There is a story that illustrates this with heartbreaking beauty. It is the story of a young woman named Kisa Gotami. She lived a happy life until her young son, her only child, fell ill and died. Consumed by a grief so powerful it bordered on madness, she refused to accept his death. Clutching his small, lifeless body, she went from house to house, from person to person, begging for a medicine that could bring him back to life. Some people mocked her, others turned away in pity, but no one could help. Finally, a wise man, seeing her desperation, told her that she should go and see the Buddha, for he was known as the great physician and might have the cure she sought. Kisa Gotami ran to the Buddha and laid her child at his feet, pleading with him to perform a miracle. The Buddha looked at her, not with pity, but with an ocean of compassion. He did not dismiss her. He did not tell her that her quest was impossible. Instead, he said to her, "There is only one medicine that can help, but you must fetch the ingredient for me. I need you to bring me a single mustard seed." Kisa Gotami's heart soared with hope. A mustard seed was so simple, so easy to find. But, the Buddha continued, the seed must come from a house where no one has ever died. Not a child, not a husband or wife, not a parent or a servant. Filled with a renewed sense of purpose, Kisa Gotami began her quest. She went to the first house in the village. "The Buddha has sent me," she said. "I need a mustard seed to make a medicine for my son. Can you give me one?" "Of course," the kind woman of the house replied, bringing out a handful of seeds. As Kisa Gotami reached for one, she remembered the Buddha's condition. "Tell me," she asked, "has anyone in this house ever known death?" The woman's face fell. "Oh, my dear," she said sadly, "do not remind me of my greatest sorrow. My husband died only last year." Kisa Gotami gently put the seeds back and went to the next house, and the next, and the next. The story was always the same. Every house had a mustard seed to give, but every house had also been visited by death. My youngest son died here. My mother passed in this very room. We lost our beloved father. She went through the entire village, and then to the next, and her desperate, frantic search began to slow. With each conversation, her own personal, isolating grief began to change. She saw that the fire of loss that was burning her alive was a fire that had touched every single home. Her pain was not a unique curse sent to torment her alone. It was the shared, unavoidable truth of what it means to be alive. The solid wall of her private agony began to dissolve, merging into the vast, common ocean of human experience. As dusk fell, she sat by the side of the road, watching the flickering lamps of the village being lit one by one, only to be extinguished a few hours later. And in that moment, she understood. She returned to the Buddha, her arms empty of her child, and without a single mustard seed. "Have you brought the seed?" he asked gently. "The work is done, my lord," she replied. "I see now that the dead are far more numerous than the living. I thought my sorrow was my own, but it is the sorrow of everyone." In that moment of profound realization, Kisa Gotami was no longer a woman crazed by grief. She was a woman awakened to the truth. She was ready to walk the path to peace. Her story is our story. We are all, in our own way, carrying our own version of her dead childer lost dream, a past hurt, a future fear believing our pain is unique and insurmountable. We are all searching for that one magical house, that one perfect solution that has never known loss or disappointment. The first noble truth is the journey of Kisa Gotami. It is the compassionate invitation to walk from door to door in our own lives and to see with clarity that the condition of dukkha, of dissatisfaction and loss, is woven into the very fabric of existence. It is not a punishment. It is simply what is. And by finally accepting this, by understanding that our struggle is the human struggle, we can finally put down our impossible burden. We can stop fighting reality. And we can begin to ask the next, most vital question. If this is the condition, what is its cause? We have sat with the diagnosis, the courageous acknowledgement of dukkha, that pervasive sense of unsatisfactoriness that hums beneath the surface of our lives. We have seen, through the eyes of Kisa Gotami, that this is not a personal failing but a shared human truth. And so the great physician, having identified the symptom, now points us toward its root cause. The cause is not found in a specific event, a personal flaw, or an external enemy. It is found in a universal law, as fundamental as gravity, yet so often ignored by our struggling minds. This law is the second great truth on our journey, and its name is anicca, impermanence. Anicca is the teaching that everything, without a single exception, is in a constant state of flux. Nothing is static, nothing is permanent. Everything that comes into being will eventually pass away. This is not a complex philosophical theory. It is an observable fact, evident everywhere we look. We see it in the grand, cosmic dance of the universe. Stars are born in fiery nebulae. They shine for billions of years, and then they collapse and die, seeding the cosmos with the elements for new worlds. We see it in the patient geological time of our own planet. Mountains that seem like symbols of eternal strength are slowly, grain by grain, being worn down by wind and rain, destined to become dust. Great empires that once ruled the world, convinced of their own everlasting power, now exist only as silent ruins and stories in history books. But we don't need to look at the stars or ancient ruins to see anicca. We can see it in the simple turning of the seasons. The green leaf of summer becomes the golden leaf of autumn, falls in winter, and nourishes the new growth of spring. We see it, most intimately, in our own bodies. The face you see in the mirror today is not the exact same face you saw yesterday. Millions of your cells have died and been replaced overnight. The body you inhabit now is not the body you had 7 years ago, or the one you will have 7 years from now. From the moment we are born, we are engaged in a constant, unstoppable process of change. We are not a static object, like a statue carved from stone. We are a process, like a candle flame, constantly consuming and transforming, always in motion, never the same from one moment to the next. And this law applies most powerfully to the one place we feel most identified with, our own minds. Think of your thoughts. Where do they come from? They arise, seemingly from nowhere. They capture our attention for a moment, and then they vanish, replaced by the next one. Think of your emotions. Can you hold on to a feeling of pure joy forever? It arrives, perhaps triggered by good news or a beautiful sunset. It fills you completely, and then, slowly or suddenly, it subsides. The same is true for sadness, for anger, for fear. They are visitors. They come, they stay for a while, and then they leave. The emotional weather of our minds is in a constant state of change. The person who felt energetic and optimistic this morning might feel tired and discouraged by the afternoon. This is not a sign of instability. It is the very nature of our conscious experience. So, if everything is always changing, where does our suffering, our dukkha, come from? It comes from a fundamental, tragic misunderstanding. The pain is not caused by the fact of change itself. The pain is caused by our resistance to the fact of change. Reality is a flowing river. But our minds, conditioned by a deep-seated craving for security and certainty, are constantly trying to build a solid, permanent house right in the middle of it. This is the core conflict that generates almost all of our mental anguish. When we experience something pleasant, a happy relationship, a moment of success, the peak of our health and youth, we try to dam the river. We grasp onto the experience. We cling to it, terrified of it ending. We try to freeze a beautiful flowing moment and turn it into a static monument. But the river of reality keeps flowing, and our desperate attempt to hold it back creates immense tension, anxiety, and eventual heartbreak when, inevitably, the moment passes. Conversely, when we experience something unpleasant, grief, illness, failure, a painful emotion, we try to frantically claw our way to the riverbank. We resist the unpleasant flow with all our might. We believe that this state of pain is solid, that it will last forever, and our desperate struggle against it only intensifies our suffering. We are fighting the very current that would, if we allowed it, eventually carry us to a different part of the river, to a different experience. Our suffering is the friction generated between our desire for permanence and the absolute reality of impermanence. We are trying to grab hold of the wind. We are trying to write our name on the surface of the water. At first, this might sound like a reason for despair. If nothing lasts, what's the point? But this is where the teaching reveals its profound, liberating beauty. The truth of anicca is not a curse. It is the ultimate good news. It is a promise of freedom. Because if happiness is impermanent, then by that same unbreakable law, so is your pain. The anxiety you feel right now is not a life sentence. The grief that weighs on your heart is not a permanent fixture of your being. The feeling of being stuck is itself a temporary state. Like a storm cloud passing through the vast, open sky of your awareness, it cannot, by its very nature, last. This understanding is a key that can unlock the deepest prisons of despair. It doesn't mean the pain isn't real. It means the pain is not final. Furthermore, impermanence is the very basis of hope and growth. If things were permanent, no change would be possible. A mistake would be a permanent stain. A bad habit would be an unbreakable chain. But because of anicca, healing is possible. Learning is possible. You are not trapped into being the person you were yesterday. Every moment offers a new opportunity to begin again. The future is not a solid block of predetermined fate. It is an open, fluid potential that is shaped by the actions you take right now. Finally, understanding anicca allows us to truly appreciate our lives. We cherish the warmth of a sunbeam precisely because we know the sun will set. We value the time with our loved ones more deeply when we understand the fragile, precious, and temporary nature of our time together. Impermanence does not drain life of its meaning. It infuses every single moment with a poignant, irreplaceable beauty. There is a classic parable that captures this wisdom perfectly. A young, earnest student, troubled by the chaos of the world, went to his old, wise teacher, who was sitting by the bank of a great, flowing river. "Master," the student said, "my mind is in turmoil. Everything is always changing. I lose what I love, and I am burdened by what I hate. How can I find something solid, something real and unchanging to hold on to in this life?" The teacher said nothing. He simply gestured for the student to sit beside him and watch the river. After a long silence, the teacher asked, "Do you see the water flowing past us?" "Yes, master," the student replied. "Now, tell me," the teacher continued, "is the water that is touching the bank right now the same water that was touching it a moment ago?" "No, master, it is different water." "And if you were to step into this river," the teacher asked, "and then step out and step in again, would you be stepping into the same river?" The student thought for a moment. "No," he said, "for the river is always new, always flowing onward." The master smiled gently. "We call it the river, as a convenient name, but there is no single solid thing that is the river. There is only the process of rivering. There is only the ceaseless flow. Your suffering, the master concluded, comes from believing you are a rock, separate from the water, trying to find a solid place to stand. But you are not the rock. You are the river. Your body is the river. Your thoughts are the river. Your feelings are the river. Stop trying to hold on. Stop fighting the current. Learn the wisdom of the water. Learn to flow. That is the only real peace there is. To learn to flow is to internalize the truth of anicca. We can practice this every day. Watch the clouds in the sky. Notice how they form, drift, change their shape, and dissolve without any struggle. Allow your thoughts and feelings to be like those clouds. Don't grab onto the pleasant white ones or push away the dark, stormy ones. Just watch them pass. Listen to the sounds around you. A voice, a passing car, the song of a bird. Each one arises in the silence, exists for a moment, and fades back into the silence. Your breath is your most intimate teacher of impermanence. Each inhale is a new beginning. Each exhale is a letting go. It is a constant, rhythmic reminder that life is a flow, a pulse, not a fixed state. By understanding anicca, we begin a profound shift in our relationship with life. We move from being a victim of change to an intelligent participant in its endless creative dance. We see that the wall of our suffering is not solid stone, but is made of flowing water. And if our suffering is not solid, if it too must change, then what about the one who suffers? What about that sense of I that feels the pain or the joy? Is that I the one solid rock in the middle of the river? Or is it possible that the observer, the self we hold so dear, is also part of the unending flow? This question leads us to the next, and perhaps most revolutionary, step on our journey. We have journeyed to the bank of the river and seen that all of reality, inside and out, is a constant, unending flow. This is the truth of anicca, of impermanence. We have seen that our resistance to this flow, our attempt to build a solid house in the middle of a current, is the direct cause of our dissatisfaction, our dukkha. This leads us to the most profound and perhaps most challenging question of all. As we sit on the riverbank watching our thoughts, feelings and sensations flow by, we must ask, who exactly is the one doing the watching? Is there a permanent, unchanging self at the center of this storm of change? Is there a solid, continuous I that exists behind our eyes, piloting this body, feeling these emotions? The answer to this question is the third great insight on this path, a teaching so radical it can shatter the very foundation of our identity. The teaching is called anatta, or no self. At its core, the doctrine of anatta suggests that the solid, separate, continuous self that we feel ourselves to be does not exist in the way we think it does. This is, without question, the most counterintuitive aspect of this journey. Our entire experience, our language, our whole society is built upon the bedrock assumption of I am hungry, I am happy, I have a problem, I was born on a certain date and I will die on another. This I feels like the most real thing in the world, the central character in the story of our life. Anatta does not deny that there is an experience of individuality. It asks us to investigate it, to look for this self with a clear and honest mind. And it predicts that when we look, we will not find what we expect. To begin this investigation, this wisdom tradition invites us to deconstruct our own experience into its component parts. It suggests that everything we identify as me or mine can be sorted into 5 categories, known as the 5 aggregates or the 5 bundles of experience. Let us look at each one and ask if we can find a permanent self there. The first aggregate is form. This is our physical body or skin, bones, organs, and all the physical sensations associated with them. Is the self located in the body? We have already seen that the body is a prime example of anicca, of impermanence. It is constantly changing, aging, getting sick, getting well. It is not the same body it was a decade ago or even a week ago. If the self were the body, it would be a different self every single day. Furthermore, we speak of it as my body, which implies a separate owner. So, the self cannot be the body. The second aggregate is feeling. This refers to the raw sensations that arise from contact with the world, which we categorize as pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral. A cool breeze on a hot day is pleasant. A sharp pain is unpleasant. The feeling of our clothes against our skin might be neutral. Are we our feelings? Clearly not. Feelings are like the weather. They come and go with incredible speed. Joy fades, pain subsides. If we were our feelings, our identity would flicker in and out of existence hundreds of times a day. We would be a joyful self one moment, a sorrowful self the next. This is not a stable identity, so the self cannot be our feelings. The third aggregate is perception. This is the faculty of the mind that recognizes, identifies, and labels our experience. It's the part that says blue, car, tree, or recognizes a friend's face. Are we our perceptions? This too is in constant flux. Our perceptions are conditioned by our culture, our language, our mood, and our past experiences. Two people can look at the same piece of art and have vastly different perceptions of it. Our perceptions are unreliable and ever-shifting, so the self cannot be our perceptions. The fourth aggregate is mental formations. This is a broad and crucial category that includes all of our volitional activities, thoughts, opinions, biases, intentions, desires, and habits. This is what we often think of as our personality. But are we our thoughts and opinions? Look at your own mind. Thoughts arise and pass away in a chaotic, unending stream. An opinion you held passionately 5 years ago may seem foolish to you today. Our desires and intentions shift from moment to moment. This stream of mental activity is the most turbulent and changeable part of our experience. It cannot possibly be the location of a solid, permanent self. The fifth and final aggregate is consciousness. This is the raw faculty of awareness itself, the light that allows all the other experiences to be known. Seeing consciousness, hearing consciousness, thinking consciousness. It is the simple fact of being aware. But is this awareness a single, continuous entity? When we look closely, we see that it too is not a solid block. It flickers. Consciousness of sight arises, then ceases. Consciousness of sound arises, then ceases. It is utterly dependent on the sense organs and their objects. It is not a continuous soul or spirit, but a flickering process of knowing, arising and ceasing with each moment. So, the investigation leads to a startling conclusion. If the self is not the body, not the feelings, not the perceptions, not the thoughts, and not the flickering stream of consciousness, then where is it? The profound answer of anatta is that we cannot find it because it is not there to be found as a separate, solid thing. The self is not a noun, it is a verb. It is a temporary event. It is the dynamic, interdependent process of these 5 aggregates coming together, moment by moment. The word self is simply a convenient label, a useful designation we apply to this complex, flowing bundle of processes. The most famous story illustrating this is the dialogue between the Buddhist sage Nagasena and the Greco-Indian king Milinda. The king, a sharp intellectual, wished to challenge this difficult teaching. He asked Nagasena, "What is your name, venerable sir?" Nagasena replied, "I am known as Nagasena, your majesty, but this is just a name, a designation. There is no permanent person to be found here." The king was amused. "If there is no person," he retorted, "then who is it that wears these robes? Who eats, who sleeps, who studies?" To answer, Nagasena used the king's own magnificent chariot. "Your majesty," Nagasena asked, "is the chariot the wheels?" "No, venerable sir," replied the king. "Is it the axle, the frame, the reins?" To each question, the king answered no. "Then is the chariot all of these parts combined?" "No, sir." "Is the chariot something else, separate from all of its parts?" Again, the king had to say no. Nagasena then declared, "Chariot is just a convenient name we give when the wheels, the axle, the frame, and the reins are all assembled in a particular way. In ultimate reality, there is no chariot to be found. In the same way, Nagasena is just a convenient name for the collection of my body, feelings, perceptions, thoughts, and consciousness. But if you search for a permanent, unchanging self, within this collection, it cannot be found. This is not just a dry philosophical point. It is the key to unlocking the deepest forms of suffering. The illusion of a solid, separate self. This ego is the root of our most painful afflictions. It is this I that feels it needs to protect and defend itself, leading to fear and anxiety. It is this I that feels the need to enhance itself, leading to greed, ambition, and comparison. It is this I that feels separate from you, leading to loneliness, alienation, and conflict. The ego is a fortress we spend our entire lives exhaustingly maintaining and defending. It is what feels offended, what holds grudges, what fears its own ultimate annihilation in death. Seeing through this illusion, even for a moment, is liberation. It is not annihilation. You do not cease to exist. The experience of life continues, but its quality changes profoundly. When there is no solid self to defend, criticism is no longer a personal attack, but simply information. When there is no solid self to aggrandize, the relentless pressure of comparison begins to fade. When the hard boundary between me and you softens, a natural compassion and interconnectedness arises. You realize you are not a lonely rock in the river of life. You are the river itself. We have now looked at the three marks of existence. Dukkha, the disease of dissatisfaction. Anicca, its cause in the reality of impermanence. And anatta, the deepest truth that the one who suffers is not a solid entity. These three insights form the foundational map of reality provided by this ancient wisdom. With this map in hand, we can now begin to explore the terrain of our own lives, to see how these principles operate in our daily struggles, starting with the very mechanism that binds us to the wheel of suffering, the powerful, habitual act of clinging. We stand now with a map of existence in our hands. We have seen the landscape of our lives marked by the truth of dissatisfaction, or dukkha. We have understood that the fundamental law of this landscape is constant, relentless change, or anicca, and we have looked for ourselves on this map, only to find that the solid, unchanging I we search for is an illusion, a ghost in the machine. This is the truth of no self, or anatta. With this map, we are ready to identify the very engine that drives us around in circles of suffering. It is the mechanism that takes these universal truths and turns them into deeply personal pain. This mechanism is the act of grasping, of holding on, of refusing to let the river of reality flow. In the language of this ancient path, it is called upadana, clinging. Upadana is the critical link between a simple desire and a profound suffering. It is important here to make a distinction. This wisdom does not teach that all desire is wrong. The desire to learn, to grow, to create, to help another person, to awaken these are wholesome aspirations. This is known as chanda, a balanced and positive motivation that fuels the path. The problem begins when this wholesome desire curdles into something else. It begins with what is called tanha, a word that translates as thirst or craving. Tanha is that raw, reactive urge. It is the immediate pull towards something pleasanter, delicious taste, a word of praise, a feeling of comfort. It is also the immediate push away from something unpleasant, criticism, pain, discomfort. Tanha is the initial spark, the thirsty reflex of the mind. But upadana, clinging, is what fans that spark into a wildfire. If tanha is the thirst, upadana is the desperate, deluded belief that drinking salt water will quench it. It is the act of taking a fleeting desire and elevating it into a non-negotiable demand. It is the mental clenching, the emotional grasping that says, I must have this to be happy, or this must not happen for me to be okay. It is the moment the open hand of experience closes into a tight, white-knuckled fist. An open hand can receive the world. It can feel the warmth of the sun and let it go. It can feel the coolness of water and let it go. It lives in harmony with reality, but a clenched fist can receive nothing new. It lives in a state of tension and fear, desperately trying to possess a piece of the flowing river, a ray of sunlight, a gust of wind. Upadana is the futile attempt to solidify the world, and the suffering is in the clenching itself. Think of a handful of fine, dry sand. If you hold your hand open and relaxed, the sand rests there peacefully. But the moment you try to possess it, the moment you squeeze your fist tight to make sure you don't lose any, the sand streams out through the gaps between your fingers. The harder you cling, the faster you lose it. This is the perfect metaphor for our relationship with happiness. The more desperately we cling to it, the more surely we squeeze the life out of it and are left with nothing but the ache of our own tightened fist. This clinging manifests in our lives in several distinct ways. The most obvious is the clinging to sense pleasures. This is the engine of our consumer society. We become attached to specific foods, sounds, sights, and bodily comforts. We build our lives around the pursuit of the next pleasurable experience and the avoidance of any discomfort. We believe that if we can just arrange our external world perfectly with the right car, the right house, the right vacation, the right partner, we will finally stop the wobble of dukkha and find lasting peace. But because all of these pleasures are, by their nature, impermanent, this strategy is doomed to fail. It is a hunger that can never be filled, leading only to a cycle of craving, temporary satisfaction, and renewed craving. More subtly, and perhaps more destructively, we cling to our views and opinions. We grasp onto our political ideologies, our religious beliefs, our personal philosophies, and our ideas of how the world should work. We fuse our sense of self with these ideas. They become our identity. When someone challenges our opinion, it no longer feels like a discussion of ideas. It feels like a personal attack on our very being. This form of clinging is the source of endless arguments, family feuds, social division, and even war. We would rather be right than be at peace. We hold onto our views like a weapon and a shield, forgetting that they are just thoughts, just temporary mental constructs, not ultimate reality. There is also a clinging to rites, rituals, and rules. In its ancient context, this meant a blind attachment to religious ceremonies. In our modern lives, it can mean a rigid attachment to any set of habits or routines, believing that the outer form of the action is what will save us. It could be a specific diet, an extreme exercise regimen, or a set of daily rituals that we believe we must perform perfectly. The problem is not the routine itself, which can be healthy. The problem is the superstitious clinging to it, the belief that the rules themselves have inherent power, which creates immense anxiety and self-judgment when we inevitably fail to follow them perfectly. But underlying all of these is the deepest and most fundamental form of clinging, the one from which all others are born. It is the clinging to a doctrine of a self. It is upadana directed at the illusion of I. It is the relentless moment-to-moment project of propping up, defending, and perpetuating this idea of a solid, separate self we learned about as anatta. We cling to a reputation to make this I look good. We cling to possessions to make this I feel secure. We cling to views to make this I feel intelligent and righteous. Every act of grasping is ultimately an attempt to solidify this ghost, to prove that this fictional character is real and permanent. There is a powerful parable that captures the tragic absurdity of this self-imposed prison. In certain parts of the world, hunters have a clever method for trapping monkeys. They take a coconut or a gourd, hollow it out, and drill a hole in it just large enough for a monkey's open hand to slide through. Inside, they place a tempting piece of fruit or some sweet rice. Then they tie the coconut to a tree and wait. A monkey, driven by its natural craving, its tanha, will soon come along. It smells the treat, slips its slender hand into the hole, and grasps the prize. But now, its hand, clenched into a fist around the rice, is too big to pull out of the hole. The monkey is trapped. The hunters can be seen approaching, and the monkey starts to shriek and panic. It pulls and tugs with all its might, scraping its knuckles, fighting against the trap. But it will not let go of the rice. Its freedom is literally in its own hand. All it has to do is open its fist, release its grip on the prize, and it would be free to scamper up the nearest tree in an instant. But its clinging, its upadana, is so powerful, so absolute, that it would rather face capture than let go of its treasure. We are that monkey. The coconut is the world of conditions. The rice is the fleeting object of our desire relationship, a job title, a memory, an imagined future, a cherished opinion. Our grasping hand is our clinging mind. We are trapped not by the world, but by our own refusal to let go. We pull and we struggle, creating immense friction and suffering for ourselves, all while the key to our freedom lies dormant and unused in the very center of the problem. Freedom is the simple yet profound act of unclenching the fist. To understand Upadana is to see the bars of our own cage. It is to recognize the moments in our day when our hand begins to close around an experience, a thought, or an expectation. It is the beginning of wisdom. Now that we have seen this mechanism, this engine of our own distress, we can begin to observe where it is most active. And for most of us, the fist of the mind is clenched most tightly around the stories we tell ourselves, the heavy narratives we carry with us everywhere we go, the stories of our past, which we cannot change, and the stories of our future, which we cannot control. It is to these phantom realms that we now turn our attention. We have seen how the clinging mind, the clenched fist of Upadana, is the engine of our suffering. It takes the fluid, changing realities of life and tries to freeze them into solid objects we can possess or push away. Now, we turn our attention to one of the most powerful and seductive objects of our clinging, the past. The past is a realm of ghosts. It does not exist as a tangible place. You cannot buy a ticket and travel back to yesterday. The hurts, the mistakes, the triumphs, and the regrets of our personal history have no substance in this present moment. Their only power, their only reality, comes from the fact that we continually resurrect them within the sacred space of our own minds. Right now, we are not haunted by the past itself. We are haunted by our present moment reenactment of it. The old wound does not hurt us. It is our present moment picking at the scar that causes the pain to flare anew. Our clinging to this ghostly realm typically takes two primary forms: two heavy bags filled with stones that we insist on carrying with us everywhere we go. The first bag is filled with the stones of regret and guilt. This is the story of what I did wrong. We lie awake at night, replaying a conversation from 10 years ago, cringing at a foolish mistake we made in our youth, endlessly circling a moment where we hurt someone we loved. Each stone is a memory of a failure, a misstep, an unkindness. We become the eternal prosecutor and judge in the courtroom of our own minds, sentencing ourselves over and over again to a punishment for a crime that is long since over. We wonder why we are so burdened, so exhausted, so heavy, all while refusing to acknowledge the crushing weight of the bag we are carrying on our own shoulders. This is where the wisdom of anicca and anatta becomes a profound medicine. The person who made that mistake 5, 10, 20 years ago does not exist anymore. You are not that person. You are a different collection of cells, thoughts, and experiences. To punish your present self for the actions of a past self is to deny the fundamental truth of change. It is to insist that you are a solid, unchanging statue, forever defined by one flawed angle, when in reality you are a flowing river. The second bag is even heavier, and its stones are poisoned. This is the bag of resentment, blame, and grievance. This is the story of what was done wrong to me. Here, we carry the hurts, the betrayals, and the injustices inflicted upon us by others. We replay their words, we remember their actions, we nurture the feeling of righteous anger. Our identity becomes entwined with the story of our victimhood. But who is being harmed now? The event is over. The other person may have moved on, may have forgotten, may even be gone from this world. The only one experiencing the bitterness, the tension, and the corrosive anger of resentment is the one who is feeling it. Holding on to resentment is like drinking a cup of poison and waiting for the other person to die. The poison only ever harms the one who drinks it. The past event was a single arrow, but our refusal to let it go, our constant mental replaying of the injustice, is like shooting ourselves with a second, a third, 100th arrow right in the same spot. The path to liberation from this prison of yesterday is the practice of forgiveness, and it is crucial to understand what forgiveness is and what it is not. Forgiveness is not condoning. It is not saying that the harmful action was acceptable or okay. It is not about letting someone off the hook. It does not necessarily mean you must reconcile with the person who harmed you or allow them back into your life. And it is certainly not about forgetting. The mind does not have a delete button. Forgiveness is a far more radical and self-interested act. Forgiveness is the conscious, courageous decision to stop carrying the heavy bags. It is the moment you decide to put down the poisoned stones of resentment and the heavy rocks of regret. It is a gift of freedom that you give to yourself. It is the declaration that you will no longer allow an event from the past to contaminate the peace of your present moment. It is the choice to value your own well-being more than you value your own grievance. It is, in essence, the ultimate act of self-love. There is a timeless Zen story that illustrates this with piercing clarity. Two monks, one senior and one junior, were on a long pilgrimage. Their journey brought them to the edge of a wide, muddy river with a swift current. A beautifully dressed young woman stood there, looking distressed. She was afraid to cross for fear of ruining her fine silk kimono and being swept away by the current. The monks' vows were strict. They were forbidden from touching a woman. The junior monk, mindful of his vows, stood back at a respectable distance, perhaps feeling a little smug in his piety. The senior monk, however, looked at the woman, saw her genuine predicament, and without a word, walked over to her. He hoisted her up onto his shoulders, strode through the rushing water, and gently set her down on the other side. She bowed gratefully and went on her way. The senior monk nodded and continued his journey. The junior monk was utterly scandalized. He hurried to catch up, his mind a raging storm of judgment. How could he do that, he thought. He has broken one of our most sacred vows. He is impure. What a terrible example. For the next several hours, as they walked in silence, the junior monk was not present. He was back at the river, replaying the scene again and again, feeding his anger and indignation. The weight of his judgment grew heavier with every step. Finally, as they neared their destination for the evening, he could bear it no longer. He burst out, "Brother, I must speak. I am deeply troubled by your behavior back at the river. You know our vows forbid us to touch a woman, yet you lifted her up and carried her in your arms. How could you transgress so flagrantly?" The senior monk stopped, turned to his agitated companion, and looked at him with an expression of genuine surprise and gentle compassion. "Oh, the woman by the river," he said. "I set her down on the far bank hours ago. Why are you still carrying her? This story is a mirror for our own minds. The past event is the river crossing. It happened, and it is over." The senior monk is a model of a free mind. He responded to the reality of the present moment with compassion, did what was necessary, and then let it go completely. He walked on, unburdened. The junior monk is a portrait of a mind in chains. He is a prisoner, not of the event, but of his own clinging to rules, to judgments, to righteousness, and to the endless mental reenactment of the past. He is the one choosing to suffer. He is the one still carrying the woman, long after she has disappeared from view. Each of us is the junior monk in some area of our life. We carry around the ghosts of past arguments, old insults, former lovers, and professional failures. We allow them to live rent-free in our minds, draining our energy and poisoning our present. The practice of release begins with seeing this. It begins with noticing, with mindfulness, when the ghost of yesterday appears. When the memory arises, you simply acknowledge it. Ah, here is the story of my failure. Here is the feeling of that old betrayal. You see it for what it is, a thought, a feeling, a memory arising now. You see that you are the one carrying it, and you realize, with profound relief, that you have a choice. You can make the conscious decision to put it down, right here, right now. You can unclench the fist of your mind and let the ghost dissolve back into the nothingness from which it came. This is not about erasing the past, but about freeing the present. For the only time we can ever truly live is now. And as we learn to release our grip on the stories of yesterday, we inevitably find our minds drifting to another phantom realm, the foggy landscape of what is to come. It is to that world of anxiety and hope, the world of the future, that our journey now takes us. Having learned to release our grip on the heavy chains of the past, our minds, ever restless, tend to swing like a pendulum to the opposite pole of illusion. We leave the realm of ghosts only to enter the land of phantoms. We abandon the prison of yesterday for the fog of tomorrow. We cease to be haunted by what has been, and instead become tormented by what might be. This projection of the mind into the future, this constant, low-grade hum of apprehension about what is to come, is the very definition of anxiety. And to find peace, we must learn to see this fog for what it is, an insubstantial and imaginary landscape of our own creation. Anxiety is one of the most draining states of the human mind, and its mechanism is a peculiar form of self-inflicted suffering. A wise teacher once said that to worry is to pay interest on a debt you may never owe. It is to suffer twice. First, you suffer in your imagination, living through 1,000 potential catastrophes and feeling the very real emotional and physical pain of each one. You feel the sting of failure before you have even tried. You feel the ache of loss for things you do not even have yet. You live through countless arguments, disasters, and embarrassments, all within the private cinema of your own mind. Then, if the feared event actually happens, and most of them do not, you suffer a second time in reality. Worry is a profound misuse of the gift of consciousness. It is the act of poisoning the peace of the present moment with the fear of a moment that does not exist. It is the clenching of the jaw, the tightening of the chest, the shallowing of the breath, all in anticipation of a blow that may never land. This anxious impulse comes from a deep and misguided belief that we can and should control the future. Because the future is uncertain, and uncertainty feels threatening to the ego, our mind believes that if it can just think through every possible negative scenario, it can somehow prevent them. It appoints itself the grand strategist, the master chess player, trying to calculate 100 moves ahead to defend against every conceivable threat. But life is not a game of chess. It is a flowing, unpredictable, and untamable river. The demand for certainty in a universe that is fundamentally defined by impermanence, by anicca, is a recipe for perpetual exhaustion. It is like trying to command the clouds or legislate the tides. To try and control everything is to carry a burden that no mind can possibly bear. The beginning of wisdom is the humble acceptance that some things are simply beyond our control. This is not an act of defeat. It is an act of profound sanity. It is the relief of letting go of an impossible job. It is crucial here to distinguish between the paralyzing act of obsessive worrying and the skillful act of wise planning. This path does not advocate for irresponsibility or a naive refusal to think about tomorrow. The difference lies in where the activity takes place. Wise planning is grounded in the present moment. It looks at the real conditions that exist right now and takes calm, rational, and practical steps to create the best possible conditions for a good outcome. A wise person planning for a journey checks their vehicle, packs what they need, and looks at a map. These are skillful actions taken now. Once these actions are complete, they let go of the outcome, understanding that they have done their part and the rest is not up to them. Obsessive worrying, however, is ungrounded. It lives entirely in the imagination. It is a purely mental act of spinning catastrophic stories, untethered from reality or productive action. There is an old story of a farmer who was given a bag of the most perfect precious seeds and a plot of fertile land. The planting season had arrived, and the conditions were good. But instead of taking up his tools, the farmer sat down under a tree and began to worry. What if I plant these seeds, he thought, and a great drought comes this summer? They will all shrivel in the earth, and my work will be for nothing. The thought filled him with such anxiety that he remained seated. Then a new thought arose. But what if the opposite happens? What if the rains are too heavy and the field floods, washing all my precious seeds away? This fear paralyzed him further. He continued to spin fantasies of disaster. What if I manage to grow the plants, but a swarm of locusts descends from the hills and devours my entire crop in an hour? Or what if a blight, a mysterious disease, rots them from the inside out? What if the birds eat the seeds the moment I plant them? For weeks, the farmer tortured himself with every conceivable calamity. He was so consumed with worrying about all the things that could go wrong that he completely forgot to do the one thing that could make something go right. He never planted the seeds. The season passed, the fertile field remained barren, and his fear of an empty harvest became a perfect, self-fulfilling prophecy, created not by a drought or a flood, but by the poison of his own anxious mind. Worry is not preparation, it is paralysis. The true way to prepare for the future is to understand that the future is not some distant land we will one day arrive in. The future is born directly out of the womb of this present moment. The quality of your tomorrow is determined by the quality of your today. The seeds of the future are the thoughts, words, and actions you are planting right now. If you want a future that is more peaceful, you must cultivate peace in this moment. If you want a future where you are more compassionate, you must practice compassion in this moment. If you want a future where you are resilient and unafraid, you must meet the small anxieties of this moment with awareness and courage. The future is not a thing to be feared or controlled. It is a thing to be created, moment by moment by moment. This understanding is profoundly empowering. It takes our focus away from the foggy, phantom realm of tomorrow over which we have little control and places it squarely in the vivid, tangible reality of today, where we have immense power. You cannot control next year's weather, but you can control whether you take your next breath with kindness and awareness. You cannot guarantee success in your career, but you can choose to perform your work in this hour with integrity and diligence. By tending to the garden of the present, we create the very best conditions for a beautiful harvest, whatever form it may take. We have learned to put down the heavy burden of yesterday's ghosts. We have now seen the wisdom in ceasing our chase of tomorrow's phantoms. This leads us to the most essential question on this entire journey. If we are not to live in the past, and we are not to live in the future, where then is our true home? Where is the only place we can ever find refuge, peace, and reality? It is to this precious and often overlooked territory that we now turn our full and undivided attention. We have come to a pivotal turning point on our journey. We have explored the ghostly realm of the past and recognized that its power over us is an illusion we create in the present. We have peered into the foggy landscape of the future and seen that our anxiety is a futile attempt to control the uncontrollable. We have let go of yesterday and ceased our chase of tomorrow. And so we are left standing, unburdened, at the only point in all of eternity where life actually exists. We are here, now. The present moment is our only true home, our only real refuge. Yet for most of us, it is a home we rarely visit. Our bodies are here, but our minds are lost somewhere else. The great task, then, is to learn how to come home. The key that unlocks the door to this home is the practice of mindfulness, or sati. Mindfulness is a word that has become very popular, but it is often misunderstood. It is not some mystical, trance-like state. It is not an attempt to empty the mind or to force our thoughts to stop. The mind's nature is to think, just as the heart's nature is to beat. To try and violently stop your thoughts is a form of inner conflict that only creates more tension. The practice of mindfulness is something far more gentle, simple, and profound. The most classic definition is this: mindfulness is paying attention, on purpose, in the present moment, and non-judgmentally. Let us unpack that. Paying attention, on purpose, means that it is a conscious and intentional act. Our attention is the most valuable resource we have, and we are choosing where to place it, rather than letting it be hijacked by every passing thought or external distraction. In the present moment means we are bringing our awareness to the raw, unfiltered reality of our experience as it is happening right now, not as we remember it from the past or imagine it in the future. And the final part, non-judgmentally, is the most crucial and the most challenging. It means we observe our experience with a quality of gentle, open curiosity, rather than immediately labeling it as good or bad, like or dislike. It is the difference between simply noticing the sensation of cold and launching into a story of, "I hate being cold, this is terrible, I wish it were warmer." It is the practice of replacing our inner critic with an inner scientist, impartially observing the data of our own senses. Most of us live our lives on autopilot, in a state of mindlessness. We eat a delicious meal while scrolling on our phone, not tasting a single bite. We drive to work and arrive with no memory of the journey, lost in a daydream of plans and worries. We have a conversation with a loved one while mentally composing an email. Our body is in one place and our mind is in another. We are, in essence, absent from our own lives. Mindfulness is the simple, radical act of bringing the mind and body back together, in the same place, at the same time. It is to consciously feel the warmth of the water on your hands as you wash the dishes. It is to truly listen to the words the other person is saying. It is to feel the sensation of your feet on the ground as you walk. It is, quite simply, the act of showing up for your own life. The great power of mindfulness lies in its ability to create a space, a sacred pause, between a stimulus and our reaction to it. In our mindless autopilot state, this process is instantaneous. A driver cuts us off in traffic, the stimulus, and before we know it, our heart is pounding, our hands are clenched, and we are shouting in anger. The reaction. There is no space, no freedom. It is an automatic, conditioned reflex. Mindfulness inserts a moment of awareness into that chain. The driver cuts you off, stimulus, and in that moment, a mindful mind notices, a feeling of anger is arising. I feel heat in my chest. I feel an urge to yell. Because you have noticed it non-judgmentally, you are no longer possessed by it. You have created a space, and in that space lies your freedom. You now have a choice. You might still choose to honk the horn, but it is a conscious choice, not a blind reaction. Or you might choose to take a breath, to let the feeling pass, to remember that the other driver is also a human being who is likely suffering in their own way. Mindfulness breaks the chains of our habitual reactivity and makes us the master of our own responses rather than the slave of our own emotions. There is a story of a man who spent his entire life in search of a mythical jewel, a gem said to grant its owner perfect and lasting peace. He sold all of his possessions, left his home and family, and embarked on a great quest. He traveled the world, enduring immense hardship. He climbed the highest mountains, crossed the most treacherous seas, and explored forgotten ruins, always believing the jewel was just over the next horizon. Years turned into decades. He grew old, weary, and disillusioned. Defeated, he finally made the long journey home. He sat down in the dusty, empty room where he had started, his life's quest a complete failure. As he slumped over in despair, his hand brushed against a small leather pouch that had been hanging from his belt for as long as he could remember. He had never paid it any mind. Out of idle curiosity, he opened it and tipped its contents into his palm. Out fell a smooth, warm stone that began to glow with a soft, steady, and peaceful light. It was the jewel. It had been with him the entire time, in his own pocket, but he had been too busy and distracted searching for it everywhere else to ever notice what he already possessed. We are all that person. The priceless jewel is the present moment. We search for peace and happiness in the future, in the next job, the next relationship, the next achievement. We rummage for it in the past, in our memories of better times. We ignore the infinite treasure that lies right here, in the simple, humble, and profound reality of this very moment. The practice of mindfulness is the act of stopping our frantic external search and finally looking in our own pocket. The simplest way to begin this practice is by using the anchor of the breath. The breath is a perfect object for mindful attention. It is always with you, from the moment of your birth to the moment of your death. It is always happening right now. Its sensation is gentle and neutral. All you need to do is to bring your attention to the physical sensation of breathing. You can feel the coolness of the air as it enters your nostrils and the warmth as it leaves. You can feel the gentle rising of your abdomen on the in-breath and the falling on the out-breath. Your only job is to rest your attention there. Inevitably, your mind will wander. It will be distracted by a sound, a thought, a memory. This is not a failure. It is simply what minds do. The practice is not about preventing the mind from wandering. The practice is the moment you realize it has wandered, and then gently, kindly, and without scolding yourself, you escort your attention back to the breath. Every time you return, you have strengthened your muscle of mindfulness. As we practice this, we become more intimate with the workings of our own consciousness. We become more aware of all the visitors who walk through the house of our mind. And while we learn to see our thoughts more clearly, we also become much more aware of our feelings, the pleasant ones, but also the difficult ones. We can no longer ignore the presence of anger, fear, sadness, or grief. Now that we have stopped running and have come home to the present moment, what do we do when we find the house is in the middle of a storm? How do we sit with these powerful emotional energies without being swept away? It is to this crucial skill that we now must turn. Having returned home to the present moment through the practice of mindfulness, we have found our anchor. We have discovered a place of quiet observation, a refuge from the storms of the past and future. But what happens when the storm is not in the past or future, but is raging with full force, right here, right now? What do we do when the present moment, the very home we have returned to, is filled with the raw and powerful energies of anger, fear, or profound sadness? Our instinct, taught to us by a lifetime of conditioning, is to either fight or flee. This section of our journey is about learning a third way, a middle path of wisdom and courage in the face of our most difficult emotions. Typically, when a painful emotion arises, we react in one of two unskillful ways. The first is suppression. We are taught from a young age that so-called negative emotions are signs of weakness or are socially unacceptable. So when anger or deep sadness appears, we push it down. We ignore it, deny it, or distract ourselves with work, entertainment, or other substances. We try to hold a beach ball underwater. This act of suppression requires a tremendous and constant expenditure of energy, and it is ultimately futile. The suppressed energy does not disappear, it mutates. It festers in the dark, turning into bitterness, resentment, chronic anxiety, or a numb depression. Eventually, the beach ball will pop up with explosive and often inappropriate force. The second unskillful reaction is the opposite extreme, unrestrained expression and amplification. In this mode, we become completely identified with the emotion. We do not just feel anger, we are anger. We are possessed by it. We feed it with stories, justifications, and blame. We ruminate on the injustice, replaying the scene in our minds, adding more fuel to the fire until it consumes us. We become the storm itself, tossed about by its winds, causing damage to ourselves and those around us. This path leads to broken relationships, deep regret, and a life lived at the mercy of our own volatile inner weather. The path of wisdom offers a third option, a middle way between the extremes of suppression and amplification. This path is built upon the profound insight we have already explored. You are not the storm, you are the sky. Your fundamental awareness is like the vast, open sky, and your emotions are like the weather that passes through it. The sky is not harmed by the most violent thunderstorm, nor does it cling to the most beautiful sunny day. It allows all weather to arise, to be present for a time, and to pass away naturally. To realize this is to begin to untangle your identity from the fleeting emotional states that move through you. The practice, then, is one of courageous and compassionate allowing. Instead of turning away from a difficult emotion, you learn to turn towards it. You learn to be with it, to investigate it, and to hold it in a spacious, non-judgmental awareness. This is the art of feeling your feelings fully, without letting them become you. Let us take the powerful emotion of anger as an example. When you feel the familiar heat of anger begin to rise, the first step is simply to recognize it mindfully. You can say to yourself, softly and internally, anger is present. This is what anger feels like. This simple act of naming creates a space. It shifts you from being the anger to being the one who is aware of the anger. The second step is to give the feeling permission to be there, just for a moment. Instead of fighting it or judging yourself for it, you practice acceptance. It is okay that this feeling of anger is here right now. This stops the second layer of suffering, the guilt or shame we often feel about feeling angry. The third, and most transformative step, is to move your attention from the story in your head, the story about who is to blame and why your anger is justified, and bring your full, curious attention to the raw, physical sensations of the emotion in your body. Where exactly do you feel the anger? Is it a tightness in your jaw, a clenching in your fists, a burning sensation in your chest or face, a buzzing, vibrating energy throughout your limbs? Approach these sensations like a kind scientist. Be curious about their texture, their intensity, their location. Do not judge them, just feel them as pure physical energy. As you stay with these raw sensations, you will make a profound discovery. you will see that they are not solid or static. They are pure anicca. The energy pulses, shifts, and changes. The intensity crests like a wave, and then, if you do not feed it with more angry thoughts, it begins to subside. You are allowing the energy of the emotion to naturally live out its short, impermanent life and dissipate on its own. You are allowing the storm to pass through the sky without resistance. There is a powerful mythological story that perfectly illustrates this principle. On the eve of his enlightenment, as the Buddha sat in deep meditation beneath the Bodhi tree, he was assailed by the demon Mara, the lord of illusion and the embodiment of all temptation and fear. Mara was determined to prevent the Buddha from attaining liberation. He first sent his 3 beautiful daughters to seduce him with visions of sensual pleasure. The Buddha remained unmoved, simply seeing them for what they were, impermanent creations of the mind. Enraged, Mara then summoned his terrifying demonic armies. They unleashed a storm of weapons upon the sitting Buddha, showers of arrows, spears, rocks, and flaming embers. Here, the great miracle occurred. The Buddha did not create a magical shield. He did not fight back. He did not run away. He simply remained seated, abiding in a state of boundless, loving awareness. And as the deadly weapons flew through the air towards him, they were transformed. The arrows and spears turned into a rain of soft, fragrant lotus petals. The rocks became celestial flowers, and the burning embers became a beautiful offering of light. Mara's power was rendered completely useless. The Buddha's peace was so absolute that it had the power to disarm all violence. He is said to have simply looked upon the demon and said, "I see you, Mara." In that moment of clear seeing, without fear or hatred, the demon's power dissolved. We are all the Buddha sitting under the tree. Mara's armies are our own difficult emotions, our lust, our hatred, our greed, our fear, our doubt. Our typical response is to fight them, which only gives them more reality and power. The wisdom path teaches us to follow the Buddha's example, to meet these powerful energies not with resistance, but with a vast, open, and accepting awareness. When we can look at our own anger and say, without fear, "I see you," we rob it of its power to control us. We see it for what it is not, a solid, demonic enemy, but an impermanent cloud of energy that, if held in the spaciousness of our awareness, will transform into harmless flowers and drift away. This same principle applies to all our difficult emotions. When sadness or grief arises, we can allow ourselves to feel the raw physical ache of it in our hearts, to hold that tender pain with kindness, knowing it is the testament to our love. When fear or anxiety about the future comes, we can observe the trembling, electric energy in our bodies without getting lost in catastrophic stories. We learn that emotions are not our enemies. They are simply messengers, temporary energies passing through. By learning to meet them with mindfulness, we can finally stop being the victim of our own inner weather. And as we become more skillful at navigating our own internal world, this wisdom naturally begins to transform our relationship with the external world, especially with the other people who so often trigger these very storms. It is to the complex, beautiful, and challenging dance of human relationships that we now must turn. Having learned to sit with the storms of our own inner world, we must now turn this wisdom towards the most complex and charged area of our lives, our relationships with other people. It is here, in the beautiful and often painful dance of human connection, that our practice is most severely tested. It is in our interactions with partners, family, friends, and colleagues that our deepest attachments, our most powerful emotions, and our most cherished illusions about life are brought to the surface. It is here that the wisdom of impermanence, of anicca, can offer us a path to a deeper, more resilient, and more authentic kind of love. In our culture, love and long-term relationships are often portrayed as a destination of safety and permanence. We seek a partner to complete us, to be our rock, to provide a final, secure anchor in the chaotic sea of life. We fall in love not just with a person, but with an idea of a future, a static picture of shared happiness that we expect to last forever. We take a snapshot of the person in the early, blissful days of a relationship, their habits, their dreams, their way of being, and we frame it in our minds. Then we spend years trying to force the real, living, changing person in front of us to conform to that old, frozen picture. This is the source of immense suffering. The fundamental truth of Anika does not stop at the boundary of our relationships. The person you love is not a solid, unchanging monument. They are a flowing river, just as you are. Their thoughts, their feelings, their beliefs, their dreams, and their very selves are in a constant state of flux. To expect them to be the same person they were 5 years ago is as futile as expecting the river to stop flowing. When we cling to a fixed image of them, we are no longer loving the real person in front of us. We are in love with a ghost of our own memory. This clinging leads to disappointment when they change, to frustration when they don't meet our static expectations, and to conflict as we try to control and shape them back into the image we prefer. The pain comes not from the fact that they changed, but from our resistance to that natural, inevitable, and beautiful process. To love with wisdom is to embrace the truth of impermanence. It is to let go of the fixed photograph and learn to appreciate the ever-changing movie of the person's life. It is to meet them with fresh eyes each day, with a curiosity about who they are now, rather than an attachment to who they once were. It means understanding that love itself is not a static object to be acquired, but a living, dynamic process. It is a garden that must be tended to. Some seasons it will be full of vibrant flowers, and other seasons it may lie dormant or be challenged by weeds and drought. The practice is to tend the garden through all its phases with patience and care, rather than panicking and trying to force it to be eternally in bloom. It is to love the reality of the relationship, not just the idealized memory of it. There is a profound story told about the great 20th century meditation master Ajahn Chah that beautifully illustrates this principle. One day, while teaching, he held up a simple drinking glass. "You see this glass?" he asked his students. "For me, this glass is already broken. I enjoy it. I drink water from it. When the light hits it, it shines beautifully. But I am always aware that its nature is to break. It is made of fragile material, and someday the wind might knock it from the table, or my own hand might slip. And so, when the day comes that it falls to the floor and shatters into 100 pieces, I will not be shocked or devastated. I will simply look down and say, 'Of course. It has only followed its nature.'" He then looked at his students with deep compassion. "Everything and everyone we hold dear is like this glass. We love our partners, our parents, our children, our friends. We cherish their presence in our lives. We enjoy their company immensely. But their nature, like our own, is to change, to get sick, to grow old, and to eventually be separated from us. If we can learn to hold them in our hearts, as we hold this glass, with a clear and gentle understanding of their impermanent nature, we can love them more freely, more completely. When we know our time together is precious and finite, we are less likely to waste it on petty arguments, unspoken resentments, or taking their presence for granted. We can appreciate the gift of this moment with them, without the fearful clinging that poisons so much of our love. And when the inevitable day of separation comes, whether it is through a change of heart, a move across the country, or the finality of death, we can grieve our loss fully and deeply, for our love is real. But a part of our heart can also look upon the situation and say with a quiet, accepting wisdom, "Of course." This is not a teaching of cold detachment. It is the very opposite. It is a call to a more vibrant, present, and courageous form of love. To see the glass as already broken is not to devalue it. It is to appreciate its fragile beauty with every use. To love a person with an awareness of their impermanence is not to love them less. It is to love them more for who they are, right now, in this unrepeatable moment. True love is not possession. It is appreciation. It is the joy of two rivers flowing side by side, each on their own journey, sharing a stretch of the landscape together, without demanding that the other stop flowing or change its course. This wisdom helps us to hold our relationships with an open hand rather than a clenched fist. The clenched fist of possessive love, born from the fear of loss, inevitably crushes the very thing it tries to hold. The open hand allows our loved ones the freedom to be themselves, to grow and to change, and it allows us to receive the gift of their presence without the burden of unrealistic expectations. It is the understanding that every meeting in life contains within it the seed of a future parting. To know this is not to live in fear of that parting, but to be fully and gratefully present for the meeting. It is the ultimate motivation to be kind now, to forgive now, to speak our love now, for now is the only time we are ever truly guaranteed. As we apply this deep understanding to our most intimate connections, we find a new sense of peace and freedom. And this same wisdom can be applied to the other great source of pressure and identity in our modern world, the demanding and equally impermanent realm of our work and our ambitions. Having explored the intricate dance of our closest human connections through the lens of impermanence, we now turn that same light of awareness to another central pillar of modern identity, our work, our ambitions, and our deep-seated need for success and recognition. For many of us, the questions, "Who are you?" and "What do you do?" are answered with the same word. We fuse our sense of self with our job title, our professional reputation, and the rung we occupy on the ladder of success. We invest our lives in building this edifice of career, believing that somewhere near its peak, we will find a permanent state of security, validation, and happiness. But this too is a castle built on sand, beautiful perhaps for a time, but destined to be washed away by the relentless tides of anicca. The professional world is a theater of constant change. Companies that seem invincible today can vanish tomorrow. Industries are disrupted and made obsolete by new technologies. The skills that make you valuable in this year's market may be irrelevant in the next. You may be praised and promoted one day, only to be downsized and forgotten the next. To build the entire structure of your self-worth on these external, shifting conditions is to engage in a dangerous and exhausting gamble. It is to tie your inner peace to a roller coaster you cannot control. The suffering comes not from the inevitable ups and downs of a career, but from our desperate clinging to the ups and our terrified aversion to the downs. We suffer because we believe that our job title is who we are, and that our success or failure is a final verdict on our value as a human being. This wisdom path invites us to a radical reorientation. It suggests that we can find a profound sense of meaning and peace in our work by shifting our focus from the prize to the process. In a world obsessed with outcomes, the promotion, the salary, the public recognition, we can choose to find our satisfaction in the quality of our effort itself. The key is to transform our work, whatever it may be, into a practice of mindfulness and integrity. Instead of asking only, "What will this get me?" we can begin to ask, "How am I showing up for this task right now? Am I working with diligence and care? Am I treating my colleagues with kindness and respect? Am I bringing my full, undivided attention to the matter at hand, whether it is composing a complex report or simply cleaning a floor? Am I learning something? Am I contributing something of value, no matter how small?" When we find our reward in the process itself, we reclaim our power. This intrinsic satisfaction cannot be taken from us by a difficult boss, a negative quarterly report, or a shifting economy. It is a form of inner wealth that is stable and secure. This does not mean we lose our ambition or become passive. On the contrary, when we are freed from the crippling anxiety of failure and the needy craving for external praise, we can often bring a more courageous, creative, and relaxed energy to our work. We can take intelligent risks because our self-worth is no longer on the line. We can collaborate more openly because we are not locked in a desperate competition. We find dignity not in the title on our door, but in the quiet integrity of our own effort. There is a story of a man who served for many years as a wise and powerful minister to a great king. He was respected throughout the land for his insight and his just administration. When he reached an advanced age, he retired from his post and went to live in a small, simple cottage by the countryside. A younger official from the court, who had long admired him, went to visit, expecting to find the old man bored and melancholy, missing the power and prestige he once held. Instead, he found the former minister in a simple robe, with his hands in the soil, happily tending a small vegetable garden. The official was astonished. "Sir," he said, "how can you be so content here? Do you not miss the great affairs of state, the fine robes, the deference of the court, the power to shape the destiny of the kingdom?" The old man smiled, wiped the dirt from his hands, and held up a perfectly formed carrot he had just pulled from the earth. "When it was my season to be a minister," he said, "my task was to help the kingdom flourish. I gave my whole heart and mind to that task. I did it with as much care and integrity as I could. That season is now over. Now, it is my season to be a gardener. My task is to help this small plot of earth flourish. And so I give my whole heart and mind to this. You ask if I miss the power of being a minister. That would be like asking the apple tree in autumn if it misses the beauty of its own blossoms from the spring. To each season, its own purpose and its own kind of beauty. The wise person does not mourn the passing of summer when the cool air of autumn arrives. They learn to appreciate the crisp air and the golden light. My role has changed, but my practice has not. My practice is simply to cultivate with care whatever garden is in front of me. This story teaches us the grace of letting go of our roles and titles. They are temporary costumes we wear, not our skin. Clinging to a past success is just as much a burden as clinging to a past failure. This wisdom also frees us from the modern torment of constant comparison. In our hyper-connected world, we are endlessly presented with the curated successes of others. This person got the promotion, that person launched a successful company, another has achieved the perfect work-life balance. Comparison is a game the mind can never win, because it is always comparing our messy, complex, behind-the-scenes reality with someone else's polished highlight reel. It is like trying to race your own boat against the reflection of another boat in the water. The only sane and peaceful path is to turn your attention back to your own boat, on your own river. To focus on sailing it as skillfully and as beautifully as you can, regardless of how fast the other boats seem to be going. By applying this understanding, we build our professional house not on the shifting sands of external success, but on the bedrock of inner integrity. We discover that any work, performed with mindful attention and a kind heart, can become a path to peace. And as we untangle our identity from the relentless pursuit of professional status, we are able to look clearly at what often fuels that pursuit. The belief that accumulating wealth and material possessions will finally grant us the security and happiness we so deeply crave. It is to this world of things, of ownership, and of material desire that our investigation must now turn. Having untangled our identity from the shifting sands of career and reputation, we now turn our attention to the ultimate promise of that relentless pursuit, the accumulation of material possessions. Our consumer culture is built on a single powerful narrative whispered to us in 1,000 different ways every single day. The narrative is that you are not enough. There is a fundamental lack, an empty space within you, and happiness is the act of filling that void. This product, it promises, this new car, this bigger house, this more advanced phone, this fashionable piece of clothing, this is the object that will finally fill that emptiness. This is the purchase that will deliver lasting contentment, security, and peace. This wisdom path asks us to investigate this promise with an honest and clear eye to see if it is true. When we do, we discover that materialism is not a path to fulfillment, but is often a gilded cage, a burden disguised as a treasure. The first illusion we must see through is the promise of lasting pleasure. The joy of acquiring a new object is a powerful yet intensely impermanent experience. It is a fleeting high, a temporary distraction from the underlying hum of dukkha. For a few hours, or perhaps a few days, the new thing is exciting. We admire it, we show it to others, we feel a sense of pride and novelty. But inevitably, the law of anicca asserts itself. The thrill fades, the novelty wears off, the new car simply becomes the car we drive to work. The new phone just becomes the screen we look at every day. The initial pleasure, having no substance of its own, dissolves, and the baseline feeling of dissatisfaction returns. And the mind, still trapped in the materialist narrative, does not question the strategy itself. Instead, it concludes, "That wasn't the right thing. I need something else, something better." This is the engine of the hedonic treadmill. We are perpetually running towards the next acquisition, believing it holds the key, only to find ourselves in the exact same place of wanting, over and over again. It is a cycle of craving, temporary relief, and renewed, often stronger, craving. It is a thirst that can never be quenched. Furthermore, this path reveals a profound and counterintuitive truth. We do not own our possessions, they very quickly begin to own us. We believe that accumulating things will bring us a sense of freedom and security, but more often than not, it brings a new set of anxieties and burdens. Before you owned the beautiful, expensive painting, you did not have to worry about it being stolen or damaged in a fire. Before you owned the large house, you did not have to worry about the cost of its maintenance, the leaking roof, or the security of its doors. The more we have, the more we have to protect, to ensure, to maintain, and to worry about. Our possessions begin to occupy our mental space, demanding our time and our attention. They become a source of fear, the fear of loss. The things we acquire to make us feel secure end up making us feel more vulnerable. We become the anxious guardians of our own gilded cage. There is a powerful old story of a wealthy merchant who had spent his entire life accumulating a vast fortune. He converted all of it into a single, heavy chest filled with gold coins and precious jewels. This chest was his identity, his pride, and his only source of security. He loaded his treasure onto a small boat to cross a great lake, intending to build a palace on the other side and live out his days in luxury. Halfway across the lake, a sudden and violent storm blew in. The sky turned black, and massive waves began to crash over the sides of the small boat, which started to fill with water. The experienced boatman yelled to the merchant over the roar of the wind, "The boat is too heavy. We will sink. You must throw the chest overboard." The merchant was aghast. He grabbed onto the heavy chest, his knuckles white. This was his life, his entire being. He could not part with it. But as the boat sank lower and lower, threatening to pull them both into the churning depths, the merchant had a moment of terrifying clarity. He realized that this treasure, the very object he believed was his ultimate source of safety and happiness, was actually the golden anchor that was about to drown him. His attachment to it was about to cost him his life. With a final, agonized cry, he shoved the chest over the side. It vanished instantly into the dark water. The boat, suddenly lightened, rose higher in the water, and they were able to ride out the storm and reach the shore. The merchant arrived with nothing but the clothes on his back, yet he had never felt so alive. He understood that true wealth was not in the chest, but in the simple, precious gift of his own breath. This story teaches us that what we possess can easily become a deadly weight. This wisdom, therefore, invites us to redefine our concept of wealth. The conventional view is that wealth is the state of having much. The wisdom view is that true wealth is the state of needing little. It is the inner freedom of contentment, a state of mind known as santuti. It is a peace that is not dependent on acquiring anything from the outside world. This does not mean one must live in poverty or that it is wrong to enjoy beautiful or useful things. It simply means that we should not cling to them. We can appreciate and use our possessions with an open hand, but we do not make them the foundation of our happiness or our identity. We can enjoy the warmth of a fire without trying to grasp the flames. The most direct path to cultivating this inner wealth is the practice of gratitude. It is the simple act of consciously shifting our attention from what we lack to what we have. It is a deliberate rewiring of the mind, away from the habit of craving and toward the habit of appreciation. Instead of dreaming of a better house, we can take a moment to be truly grateful for the roof over our head. Instead of wanting a more exotic meal, we can pause and feel genuine gratitude for the simple food on our plate. We can feel gratitude for our health, for our friendships, for the ability to see and hear, for the simple, miraculous fact of being alive. This practice of gratitude fills the empty space inside us, not with more things, but with a feeling of fullness that was already there, waiting to be noticed. When you feel genuinely wealthy in your own being, the frantic, hungry need for external validation begins to fade. You step off the exhausting treadmill. The relentless pursuit of material things is, at its root, an expression of the ego's desire to fortify itself, to build a bigger and more impressive fortress. It is a fundamentally self-centered activity. To truly find a way out of this cycle of clinging, we must actively cultivate its opposite, a generous, open-hearted concern for the well-being of others. we must learn that the greatest joy comes not from getting, but from giving. It is this profound shift from a self-centered existence to a life of connection and kindness that we must now explore. It is the path of metta, of universal, unconditional loving kindness. We have walked through the great marketplace of the world, examining the promises of success and material possessions, and have found them wanting. We have seen that the frantic pursuit of things, status, and sensual pleasure is a strategy rooted in a deep sense of inner lack, a self-centered project of the ego trying to fortify its own illusory walls. This path of wisdom shows us that true fulfillment is not found by adding more to the self, but by learning to dissolve its boundaries. The most powerful way to undertake this work is to actively cultivate the opposite of a self-centered mind. It is the practice of deliberately generating a boundless, unconditional goodwill for all of life. This is the practice of metta, or loving kindness. Metta is often misunderstood in the West as a kind of sentimental, romantic, or conditional affection, but it is something far more vast and radical. Metta is a steady, universal, and impartial goodwill. It is the simple, heartfelt wish for oneself and for all other beings to be happy and free from the causes of suffering. A beautiful way to understand metta is to think of the sun. The sun does not choose who or what is worthy of its light and warmth. It shines equally on the saint and the thief, on the beautiful rose and the common weed, on the pristine temple and the muddy field. It gives its warmth freely, without judgment or condition. To practice metta is to learn how to become like the sun in our own hearts, radiating a steady and unconditional warmth to all of life. This radical practice must begin in a place that, for many of us, is the most difficult and uncomfortable, with ourselves. Our culture often teaches us that focusing on our own well-being is selfish or narcissistic, but this wisdom reveals a simple, practical truth. You cannot pour from an empty cup. You cannot genuinely wish for others to be happy if you are at war with yourself, if your own heart is filled with self-criticism and loathing. To attempt to do so is to offer a gift with one hand while holding a weapon against yourself with the other. Therefore, the practice of generating loving kindness must skillfully and necessarily begin with ourselves. It is not an act of selfishness. It is the essential act of filling our own well so that we have an abundance of water to offer to a thirsty world. The practice is simple and direct. You can sit quietly and gently repeat a few phrases directed at your own being. May I be safe from inner and outer harm. May I be healthy and strong. May I be happy and contented. May I live my life with ease. At first, this may feel awkward or even untrue, but with patient repetition, these words of kindness can begin to penetrate the armor of the inner critic and plant a seed of genuine self-acceptance. Once a small flame of warmth has been kindled for oneself, the practice then expands in ever-widening circles. The second stage is to bring to mind a benefactor or a dear friend, someone for whom it is very easy to feel love and appreciation. You hold their image in your mind, and you extend the same wishes to them. May you be safe. May you be healthy. May you be happy. May you live your life with ease. You bathe them in this feeling of unconditional goodwill. The third circle is where the practice begins to stretch the muscle of the heart. You bring to mind a neutral person. This could be the cashier at the grocery store, the person who delivers your mail, a colleague you barely know. It is someone you have no strong feelings about, positive or negative, and you extend the very same wishes to them. This is a powerful practice because it helps you to see the full humanity of people you normally overlook. You begin to recognize that this neutral person is, just like you, the center of their own universe, with their own hopes, fears, and a deep desire to be happy. The walls of indifference begin to dissolve. The fourth circle is the most challenging and transformative. Here, you bring to mind a difficult person, someone with whom you have conflict or for whom you feel dislike. It is wise to start with someone only mildly irritating, not the greatest enemy of your life, and you attempt as best you can to offer them the same wishes of loving kindness. This is not about condoning their harmful actions or forcing yourself to like them. It is a profound act of healing for your own heart. It is the recognition that their unskillful behavior is a manifestation of their own suffering and confusion. By wishing for them to be happy, you are, in essence, wishing for them to be free from the suffering that causes them to act in harmful ways. It is the courageous act of refusing to carry the poison of hatred in your own heart any longer. Finally, the fifth circle expands to encompass all living beings. You radiate the feeling of metta outwards in all directions. All people, near and far, known and unknown, friends, neutral people, and difficult people alike. You extend it to all animals, to all creatures in the air, on the land, and in the sea. May all beings everywhere be safe. May all beings everywhere be happy. May all beings everywhere be free. In this moment, the practice breaks down the final walls of the ego, the illusion of a separate self, and connects you to the vast, interdependent web of all life. Metta is not a weak or passive sentiment. It is a powerful, protective, and transformative force. There is a famous story from the life of the Buddha that demonstrates its power. The Buddha's jealous cousin, Devadatta, made several attempts to assassinate him. After all his plots failed, he devised a final, brutal plan. He arranged for the fiercest war elephant in the kingdom, an animal named Nalagiri, to be intoxicated with alcohol and then released into the narrow lane where the Buddha was walking for alms. As the drunken, enraged elephant charged down the street, people screamed and fled in terror. The Buddha's own companions urged him to run, but he continued to walk calmly and deliberately towards the charging beast. He did not prepare a weapon or a defense. He simply focused his mind and radiated a powerful, boundless field of pure, unconditional loving kindness toward the confused and enraged animal. As Nalagiri entered this invisible field of metta, its furious charge began to slow. Its rage subsided. Its intoxicated eyes grew clear. When the great elephant reached the Buddha, it stopped, lowered its massive head, and knelt respectfully at his feet. This story teaches us that the energy of loving kindness has the power to disarm the energy of hatred and aggression. It does not meet violence with more violence. It meets it with a quality of softness and goodwill so profound that the aggression has nothing to push against, and so it dissolves. By practicing metta, we are learning to generate this protective and healing force within our own hearts. We are dismantling the fortress of self-centeredness and learning to live in a world defined not by us versus them, but by a sense of shared being. This wish for all beings to be happy is the first great expression of an open heart. But life is not only composed of happiness, it is also filled with pain. And so, the compassionate heart needs another quality to be complete: the ability to be with the suffering of the world without being crushed by it. This is the complementary practice of karuna, or compassion, and it is to this that we now turn. Having opened our hearts to the practice of metta, of wishing happiness and well-being for all, we have begun to dissolve the walls of the self-centered mind. We have learned to rejoice in the good fortune of others, to feel a genuine warmth for all of life. But the human experience is a spectrum of light and shadow. Just as we encounter joy and success in the world, we are also inevitably confronted with its opposite: pain, sorrow, and suffering. If metta is the heart's response to happiness, what is the heart's skillful response when it meets with pain? The answer lies in the second of the four great virtues of the heart, the direct companion to loving kindness. It is the practice of karuna, or compassion. Karuna is often translated as compassion, but its meaning is deeper than mere sympathy. The ancient texts describe it as the trembling or quivering of the heart in response to seeing suffering. It is the capacity to be deeply touched by the pain of another, and it is inseparable from the aspiration to see that pain alleviated. If metta is the wish, may you be happy, karuna is the wish, may you be free from suffering. They are the two wings of a single bird, and both are necessary to fly. True compassion is not a passive feeling. It is an active, engaged empathy. It is crucial to distinguish true compassion from its near enemies, feelings that look similar on the surface, but are fundamentally different in nature. The first near enemy is pity. Pity looks down from above. It says, "Oh, that poor person, I am so glad I am not in their position." Pity creates distance. It reinforces the ego by establishing a hierarchy of the fortunate and the unfortunate. Compassion, by contrast, meets the other at eye level. It recognizes the shared humanity in suffering. It says, "I am with you in this. Your pain is not foreign to me." It is built on a sense of connection, not separation. The second near enemy is a kind of overwhelming emotional contagion, sometimes called idiot compassion. This is where we become so swamped and devastated by another's pain that we drown in it ourselves, becoming paralyzed and useless. True compassion has wisdom and strength at its core. It is the courage to stay present with pain, our own or another's, without being consumed by it. It is the ability to keep our heart open and our mind clear so that we can act in a way that is genuinely helpful rather than just reacting from a place of shared panic. The very root of our ability to feel compassion is the first noble truth we explored at the beginning of our journey, the universal reality of dukkha. The reason we can feel another's pain is because we know, in our own bones, what it is to suffer. We have all experienced our own versions of loss, fear, disappointment, and confusion. When we see another person hurting, we are not seeing something alien. We are seeing a reflection of a potential that exists within our own hearts. This shared vulnerability is the bridge that allows compassion to flow. It is the recognition that, just as I wish to be free from my own suffering, so does this other being wish to be free from theirs. This understanding is the most powerful antidote to the habit of judgment. When we see someone acting in a harmful or unskillful way out of anger, greed, or ignorance, habitual reaction is one of condemnation, but the compassionate mind has learned to look deeper. It looks behind the harmful action to see the suffering that is driving it. It understands that the angry person is suffering from a deep sense of fear or powerlessness. The greedy person is suffering from a gnawing feeling of inner poverty. The arrogant person is suffering from a desperate insecurity. To see this is not to condone the harmful action, it is to understand its source. And in understanding the source, our response can shift from anger to a wish for healing. We can wish for them to be free from the inner suffering that causes them to inflict suffering on others. There is a simple and beautiful story that illustrates this principle perfectly. A mother is waiting for her young child to come in from playing in the garden. The child, full of life and energy, runs into the house, but on the way has slipped and fallen into a large mud puddle. He is covered from head to toe in thick, dark, sticky mud. He is a mess. What is the instinctive reaction of a loving mother? Does she look at her child with disgust and recoil, saying, "You are a filthy, horrible child, get away from me"? Of course not. A mother's heart does not confuse the child with the mud. She sees her pure, beloved child underneath the temporary layer of dirt. Her heart is filled with only one thought: my child is covered in mud, and I must gently and lovingly clean him. Karuna is the ability to see the world with the eyes of this mother. The mud is the skillful actions, the anger, the confusion, the greed, the jealousy, the defilements that stain our human character. The child is the fundamental goodness, the potential for light and awakening that exists within every single being. A compassionate mind does not condemn the person for their mud. It only holds the quiet, steady wish to help them wash it away. It separates the actor from the action and recognizes that the action comes from suffering, while the actor, in their deepest nature, simply wants to be happy and free. This compassionate heart is not something we either have or do not have. It is a quality that can be intentionally cultivated. The practice begins with ourselves. When we are feeling pain, we can learn to turn towards our own suffering with the same gentle, kind attention. We can hold our own sorrow or fear with a tender awareness, allowing it to be there without judgment. In learning to be compassionate with ourselves, we learn the language of compassion, which we can then extend to others. We can practice a meditation where we bring to mind someone we know is suffering. We breathe in, acknowledging their pain with a brave and open heart. We breathe out, sending them the sincere wish: may you be free from this suffering. May you find your way to peace. The practice is to train the heart to stay open, even in the presence of pain. Compassion, therefore, is not a soft or sentimental state. It is an expression of profound courage. It is the courage to be willing to feel, to be willing to connect with the painful reality of the world without shutting down. It is the strength to bear witness to suffering without being broken by it. Together, Metta and karuna, loving kindness and compassion, form the radiant heart of this path. They are the active practices that take us beyond a merely intellectual understanding and transform us from within. They are the twin virtues that allow us to engage with the world's joy and its sorrow, with an open, resilient and fearless heart. Yet, even with a heart full of love and compassion, we are still subject to the constant changes of life, the inevitable winds of gain and loss, praise and blame, pleasure and pain. How do we maintain our balance in the midst of this relentless flux? This requires the cultivation of the fourth and final of these sublime states, the quiet, unshakable peace of upekkha, or equanimity. We have opened our hearts with the practices of metta and karuna, learning to meet the world's joy with appreciative happiness and its pain with active compassion. This opening of the heart is a beautiful and essential part of the path, but it also makes us more sensitive, more attuned to the full spectrum of life. With a heart so open, how do we avoid being constantly thrown off balance? How do we engage with the world's intensity without becoming exhausted and overwhelmed? This requires the cultivation of the fourth and final of the sublime states, the quiet pinnacle of a balanced mind. It is the practice of upekkha, or equanimity. Equanimity is perhaps the most subtle and misunderstood of these virtues. It is not, as it may sound, a state of cold indifference, apathy, or detached stoicism. Indifference is a closing of the heart, a refusal to feel. Equanimity is the state of a heart that is wide open, yet perfectly poised and balanced. It is a spacious, unshakable calm that can abide in the midst of any and all of life's changing conditions. It is not born from suppressing emotion, but from a profound depth of wisdom. It is the quiet, steady peace that arises when we truly, deeply understand the nature of reality. To understand equanimity, it helps to understand the forces that constantly disturb our peace. These are known as the 8 worldly winds, and they blow upon every human life, without exception. They come in 4 pairs of opposites. The first pair is praise and blame. We are lifted up and feel elated when people praise us, and we are cast down and feel hurt when they criticize or blame us. The second pair is gain and loss. We feel secure and happy when we gain money, possessions, status, or relationships, and we feel devastated and impoverished when we lose them. The third pair is fame and disrepute. We crave public recognition and a good reputation, and we fear being unknown, forgotten, or spoken of poorly. And the final pair is pleasure and pain. We spend our lives chasing pleasant sensory experiences and running from unpleasant ones. Our normal state of being is like a leaf caught in these 8 winds, constantly being blown this way and that, with our inner peace entirely dependent on which way the wind is blowing today. The practice of equanimity is the practice of becoming the mountain, not the leaf. Imagine a great ancient mountain, its roots deep in the earth. The gentle, warm winds of praise and pleasure blow against its slopes. The mountain feels the warmth, but it is not puffed up with pride. It does not lean into the wind. It remains still. Then, the bitter, cold gales of blame and loss howl and rage against it. The mountain feels the chill, but it does not shrink or tremble in fear. It remains unmoved. The winds of fame try to lift it from its foundations, and the winds of obscurity try to bury it in shadow. But the mountain's stability does not come from the weather on its surface. Its stability comes from its vast, deep, and silent core. A mind cultivated in equanimity becomes like this mountain. It still feels the heat and the cold, the pleasure and the pain. It is not numb, but its fundamental peace, its core well-being, is no longer dependent on these fleeting external conditions. This profound balance is not achieved through willpower alone. It is the natural fruit that grows from a deep, experiential understanding of the truths we have been exploring. Equanimity arises directly from the wisdom of anicca, or impermanence. When you know, not just intellectually but in your bones, that praise is just a fleeting sound, that fame is just a collection of temporary thoughts in other people's minds, and that gain and loss are just the natural ebb and flow of a changing universe, you stop clinging so tightly to the pleasant winds and fearing the unpleasant ones. Why get overly excited or terribly depressed about a weather pattern you know is temporary? Equanimity is also rooted in the wisdom of anatta, or no self. When the wind of blame or criticism blows your way, if there is no solid, vulnerable self to feel offended, the words lose their power to wound. They are just sounds, just information passing through awareness. The mountain is not personally insulted by the storm. When the wind of praise comes, if there is no solid ego to be inflated, the kind words are received with gratitude, but they do not become a source of pride or attachment. Furthermore, equanimity is the essential protector of love and compassion. A heart without the balance of equanimity can easily suffer from burnout. It can be so overwhelmed by the pain of the world that it becomes exhausted, a condition sometimes called compassion fatigue. Equanimity provides the vast, strong, and stable container that can hold both the joy of metta and the sorrow of karuna without breaking. It allows us to care deeply, to remain engaged with the world, and to act with wisdom and courage over the long haul, because our own inner well-being is no longer being swept away by the circumstances we encounter. We can cultivate equanimity in our formal meditation by paying close attention to the changing nature of our experience. When a pleasant sensation arises, we can simply note it as pleasant without grasping for more. When an unpleasant sensation like an ache or an itch arises, we can note it as unpleasant without resisting it or wishing it away. We practice observing the entire spectrum of experience with the same even-minded, curious attention. In daily life, the practice of equanimity is the practice of letting go. It is the wisdom of doing our part, of acting with integrity and putting forth our best effort in any situation, and then consciously releasing our clinging to the outcome. It is the quiet inner whisper, "I have done what I can. The rest is not in my hands." This surrender is not a sign of weakness, but of profound strength and trust in the flow of life. Upekkha, then, is the crown jewel of the awakened heart. It is the quiet confidence and unshakable peace that comes from seeing things exactly as they are. It is the calm center in the spinning wheel of life. It is the grace that allows us to walk through the world with a heart that is both tenderly open and incredibly strong. We have now explored the high peaks of this ancient wisdom, from the nature of the mind to the cultivation of the heart and the attainment of a balanced peace. This can all feel very lofty, very philosophical. The vital question remains, how do we bring this wisdom down from the rarefied air of the mountain peak and into the simple, concrete, and embodied moments of our everyday lives? How do we translate this understanding into a felt reality in our own skin, with our own breath? It is to this profoundly practical and grounding aspect of the path that we now must turn. We have now scaled the high peaks of wisdom, exploring the sublime qualities of a heart filled with loving kindness, compassion, and the unshakable balance of equanimity. Yet, there is a danger that these profound truths can remain as just that, lofty ideas, beautiful philosophical concepts that we admire from a distance. The crucial question for any spiritual path is how to bring this wisdom down from the mountain peak and into the valleys of our ordinary, everyday lives. How do we make these truths a felt, lived reality? The bridge between the philosophical and the practical, between the mind and the world, is our own body. Our body is the anchor that moors us to the present moment, the living laboratory where the truth of impermanence is constantly on display. For most of our lives, we treat our bodies as either a tool to be used or an object to be judged. We are disconnected from its innate wisdom. Our mind is constantly time-traveling, lost in the ghosts of yesterday or the phantoms of tomorrow, while our body is always, faithfully, here in the present. The practice of embodied mindfulness is the art of reuniting this divided self, of bringing the mind home to the body, and thereby home to reality itself. The simplest and most profound way to begin this homecoming is with the breath. We have touched on this before, but its importance cannot be overstated. Your breath is your most loyal companion. It is with you from your first moment to your last. It is the most reliable anchor to the now, because you cannot breathe in the past, nor can you breathe in the future. You can only breathe right now. The breath is also a constant, gentle teacher of anicca. Every single breath is a complete cycle of life. It arises, it sustains for a moment, and it passes away. There is an in-breath, a pause, an out-breath. a pause, a birth, a life, a death, a moment of emptiness before the next birth. To pay attention to the breath is to witness thousands of lessons in impermanence every single day. The practice is simple. You do not need to change your breath, only to feel it. Bring your attention to the subtle sensations, the feeling of the air entering and leaving your nostrils, the slight coolness of the in-breath, the warmth of the out-breath. Notice the gentle rise and fall of your chest and abdomen. When your mind inevitably wanders away, the practice is not to scold yourself, but to celebrate the moment you have noticed it has wandered. That moment of noticing is mindfulness. And then, with the kindness you would show to a lost puppy, you gently guide your attention back home to the breath. We can then take this mindfulness off the cushion and into motion through the practice of walking meditation. Most of our walking is mindless. It is simply a way to get our body from point A to point B, while our mind is somewhere else entirely. Mindful walking transforms this mundane activity into a profound practice of presence. You can do this anywhere, even in a short hallway in your home. The key is to walk slowly, deliberately. Bring your full attention down, out of the busy factory of your thoughts, and into the soles of your feet. Notice the intricate ballet of sensations involved in a single step. The lifting of the heel from the floor, the feeling of the foot rising through the air, the sensation of it moving forward, and then the gentle placement of the foot back on the ground heel, then ball, then toes. Feel the pressure as your body's weight transfers onto that foot. Each step becomes a lesson in living. With every lift of the foot, you are practicing letting go of the past moment. With every placement of the foot, you are practicing arriving fully in the present one. It is a meditation in motion, a way of being completely here for every step of your own life's journey. This same principle can be applied to another of our most common and unconscious activities, eating. How often do we eat a meal while watching television, scrolling on our phone, or lost in worried thoughts, only to look down and find the plate is empty, with no memory or satisfaction of having eaten? Mindful eating is a practice of deep gratitude and connection. It begins before you even take a bite. You can look at the food on your plate, truly seeing its colors, shapes, and textures. You can take a moment to contemplate its origins, the sunlight, the rain, and the earth that grew it, the work of the farmer who planted it, and the truck driver who delivered it. This contemplation dissolves our sense of separation and connects us to the vast web of life that has brought this nourishment to us. You can then smell the food, allowing its aroma to be a conscious part of the experience. And when you take the first bite, you do so with your full attention. You chew slowly. You notice the complex flavors, the textures. You might even put your fork down between bites. You feel the food nourishing your body. This simple practice transforms eating from a mechanical act of refueling into a rich, sensual, and joyful meditation, fostering a healthier and more grateful relationship with our food and our bodies. A great teacher once summed up the essence of this embodied path with a simple instruction to his student: when you walk, just know that you are walking. When you stand, just know that you are standing. When you sit, just know that you are sitting. When you eat, just know that you are eating. Whatever you are doing, be fully present with what you are doing. This is the end of the divided self. It is the healing of the split between mind and body. When our mind is in the future while our body is in the present, we are in a state of dis-ease, of inner conflict. To be whole is to be fully where you are. To be drinking tea when you are drinking tea. To be listening when you are listening. To be feeling the warmth of the sun when you are feeling the warmth of the sun. Our body, then, is not an inconvenient vehicle for our minds, nor is it an enemy that betrays us with sickness and age. It is our most precious and immediate connection to life itself. It is our anchor in the storm of thought, our constant teacher of impermanence, and our infallible guide back home to the present moment. By learning to inhabit our bodies with this kind and curious attention, we cultivate a sense of groundedness, stability, and wholeness. This embodied presence gives us the firm foundation we need to look even more deeply into the nature of the mind itself. Now that we are no longer being tossed about by the waves, we are ready to examine the very substance of the water. We are ready to look directly at the fleeting, insubstantial, and powerful nature of the thoughts themselves. Having learned to anchor our awareness in the body, in the simple, honest reality of the breath and the physical senses, we now turn that gentle light of attention inward toward the very source of our narratives of suffering, the restless, relentless stream of thought itself. For most of us, our ordinary state of being is one of complete fusion with our minds. We live inside a non-stop internal monologue, a constant narrator who is commenting, judging, planning, and worrying from the moment we wake until the moment we fall asleep. We believe we are this voice. When the voice says, "I'm a failure," we believe it. When it says, "This situation is hopeless," we accept it as fact. When it spins a story of anxiety about the future, we live in that story as if it were a real place. We are like someone watching a movie in a dark theater, so completely absorbed in the drama on the screen that we have forgotten we are sitting in a chair, that the story is just light and shadow, and that we have the freedom to simply observe it, or even to walk out. This state of unconscious fusion with our thoughts is a form of hypnosis, and it is the direct cause of so much of our mental and emotional pain. The great liberation on this path comes with a revolutionary discovery, a fundamental shift in identity. The discovery is this: you are not your thoughts. You are the awareness in which your thoughts arise. This is perhaps the single most empowering realization one can have. Imagine that your true nature is the vast, open, boundless sky. It is inherently peaceful, clear, and spacious. Thoughts, then, are like the clouds. They drift through the sky. Some are white and fluffy, representing pleasant, happy thoughts. Some are dark and heavy, full of rain and thunder, representing our anxieties, our anger, and our sorrows. Sometimes the sky is full of clouds, and sometimes it is perfectly clear. But through it all, the sky itself is never harmed, never stained, never fundamentally changed by the clouds that pass through it. The sky does not cling to the beautiful clouds or fight against the storm clouds. It simply allows them to be, to come, and to go. We have been taught to believe we are the clouds, tossed about by every passing wind. The practice is to realize that we are the sky. This means that there is a space between the thinker and the thought. The very fact that you can be aware of a thought proves that you are not it. If you can say to yourself, "I am having a worried thought," who is the I that is noticing, and what is the thought that is being noticed? In that simple act of recognition, a space is created. Freedom lies in that space. Our work is not to get rid of the clouds, which is impossible, but to expand our awareness of the sky, to rest in the spaciousness that holds all of our mental weather. When we look closely at thoughts from this spacious perspective, we begin to see their true nature. They are not as solid or as important as we believed. Thoughts are ephemeral. They are like bubbles rising to the surface of a deep pond. They appear for an instant, shimmer with meaning, and then pop, vanishing without a trace. They have no inherent substance. Thoughts are also largely impersonal. We have this idea that we are the grand author of all our thoughts. But in reality, the mind is more like a radio receiver, picking up random signals from our memory, our culture, our conversations, and our environment. Many thoughts that arise are simply mental debris, echoes of the past, random firings of neurons. To take every single one of them personally, to believe they are all meaningful truths about ourselves, is a profound and exhausting error. A thought is not a command. It is merely a suggestion, an event in consciousness. The thought, "I need to worry about this for 3 hours," is not an order you must obey. It is simply a cloud drifting by, and you have the choice to let it go. A wise Zen master once taught a student who was deeply frustrated with his own mind. "Master," the student said, "I try to meditate, I try to find peace, but my thoughts are like a swarm of angry bees. The more I try to fight them, the more they sting me." The master smiled and said, "You are making your mind a battlefield when it should be an empty house. Do not fight, simply sit." Imagine your mind is a simple room with a door at the front and a door at the back. Your task is not to be a guard, but to be the host who sits quietly in the middle of the room. The student was confused. The master continued, "Thoughts will arrive. They will knock and open the front door. A memory of anger will walk in. A plan for dinner will stroll through. A wave of sadness might crawl across the floor. Do not run to the front door to try and block them. This is a waste of your strength. Let them come. But, and this is the entire secret, do not serve them tea. Do not get up and engage them in conversation. Do not ask them where they have been or where they are going. Do not offer them a seat and ask them to stay. If you do not give them your attention, if you simply remain seated in the center of the room, they will see that you are a poor host. They will get bored, and they will, of their own accord, find the back door and leave. Your only job is to not serve tea. This simple story contains the entire practice. Not serving tea is the art of non-engagement. It is not suppression. Suppression is like pushing a beach ball under the water. It takes immense effort, and the moment you relax, it explodes back to the surface with even more force. Observation is different. It is a gentle allowing. You see the angry thought walk in. You might even nod at it with a soft mental not en gerande. Then you return your attention to your seat, to your breath. You don't follow the thought, analyze its history, or justify its presence. You let it be, and in being left alone, it runs out of energy and shows itself out the back door. The goal is to cultivate a mind that is like water. Some people's minds are like stone. When a negative thought arises, they carve it into the stone with endless repetition and analysis. The groove gets deeper and deeper, and they carry that heavy, inscribed stone with them everywhere. A better way is to have a mind like sand. When a thought comes, it is like writing a line in the sand. It's there, it's clear for a time, but the next gentle wave of awareness comes and smooths the surface over, making it ready for whatever comes next. But the ultimate goal is to have a mind like the surface of a still lake. A thought is like drawing a finger across the water. For an instant, a line, a ripple appears. But the moment the finger is gone, the water is instantly smooth again, leaving no trace, no history, no scar. The water remains perfectly and purely itself. This is the freedom that comes from changing your relationship with your mind. You cease to be the slave of every passing whim and tyrannical thought, and you become the calm, spacious awareness that can hold all of it with ease. As we become more familiar with this inner landscape, we start to notice that while all thoughts are visitors, some are more persistent than others. Some visitors are not content to just walk through the house. They sit down, put their feet up, and demand endless cups of tea. These are the sticky, habitual thought patterns that have the most power over us. And perhaps the most persistent and troublesome visitor of all is the thought of judgment, aimed both at the world around us and, most painfully, at ourselves. It is to this thorny habit of the mind, this constant act of sizing up and cutting down, that we now turn our attention. We have sat quietly in the house of our mind, learning not to serve tea to every thought that walks through the door. We have begun to see that thoughts are not solid commands, but ephemeral visitors, clouds passing through the vast sky of our awareness. Yet, as we practice this, we notice that one visitor is more persistent than all the others. This visitor is a stern figure, robed in black, carrying a gavel. It is the judge. This thought form is not content to simply pass through. It wants to run the household. It sits in the main chair and passes sentence on everything it sees. It is the source of the constant, draining commentary that whispers in our ear all day long, and its verdicts are the source of immeasurable suffering. To find peace, we must learn to gently and firmly ask this judge to leave. The habit of judgment operates on two fronts, waging a war that leaves us exhausted and isolated. The first front is external, aimed at the world and the people in it. Our mind is a relentless rating agency. We see a person's clothes, and the judge whispers, tacky or impressive. We hear someone speak, and the gavel comes down. Intelligent, ignorant. We see a choice someone makes about their life, and we immediately render a verdict: right, wrong, foolish, wise. This outward judgment creates a constant sense of separation. It reinforces the central illusion of the ego, the anatta we have explored. It solidifies the boundary between me, the wise and righteous judge, and them, the flawed and foolish masses who are being judged. This act of separation is the very antithesis of compassion. It is an act of closing the heart. Every time we judge another, we build the walls of our own prison a little higher, trapping ourselves in a lonely fortress of superiority, wondering why we feel so disconnected from the world. But as damaging as this external war is, the second front is often far more brutal. This is the war we wage against ourselves. Here, the stern judge becomes a vicious inner critic, a relentless prosecutor who knows all of our deepest insecurities. This is the voice that magnifies every mistake into a catastrophe. It is the voice that tells you that you are not smart enough, not attractive enough, not successful enough, not good enough. It compares your real life to the curated highlight reels of others and finds you wanting. It replays your embarrassing moments on an endless loop. This constant internal barrage of self-judgment is a profound form of inner violence. It is a state of perpetual civil war where one part of your mind is constantly attacking another. How can peace possibly take root in a mind that is at war with itself? This inner critic is the primary driver of anxiety, perfectionism, and depression. It is the anchor that keeps us chained to feelings of shame and unworthiness. The path to disarming the judge, both internal and external, is not to fight it. To judge, the judge is just to add another layer of judgment, another voice to the cacophony. The antidote is something far gentler and more radical. It is the practice of shifting from judgment to curiosity and compassion. When you notice the mind passing a harsh sentence on another person, how could they be so selfish? You can consciously interrupt the pattern. Instead of agreeing with the verdict, ask a different question, a compassionate and curious one. I wonder what pain, what fear, or what confusion is causing them to suffer in a way that makes them act like this. This single question changes everything. It shifts the entire frame from one of moral superiority to one of shared humanity. It acknowledges the universal truth of dukkha, that unskillful and harmful actions are almost always born from a place of inner suffering. This question doesn't excuse the behavior, but it opens the door to understanding, and in doing so, it opens your own heart. Similarly, when the inner critic launches its attack, you can learn to meet it with kindness instead of belief. Instead of accepting its harsh words as truth, you can see it for what it is, a frightened part of your own mind, trying to protect you from future pain in a clumsy and misguided way. You can turn to it and say, mentally, I hear you. Thank you for trying to keep me safe, but your words are causing harm. You can then offer yourself the same compassion you would offer a struggling friend. You can place a hand on your own heart and say, this is a moment of suffering. It is human to make mistakes. May I be kind to myself in this moment. This is not a battle. It is a peace treaty. It is the act of transforming the inner war zone into a place of sanctuary. There is a powerful ancient story found in the Christian Gospels, but resonant with this universal wisdom, that speaks directly to this human tendency. A teacher, seeing the habit of hypocrisy in the crowd, asks a piercing question. Why do you look at the splinter of sawdust in your brother's eye and pay no attention to the great plank of wood in your own eye? He paints a vivid, almost absurd picture of a person with a giant beam sticking out of their own face, trying to offer delicate advice about the tiny speck in someone else's. The teaching is clear. First, take the plank out of your own eye, and then you will see clearly to remove the splinter from your brother's eye. The plank in our own eye is our own unexamined suffering, our own deep-seated biases, our own insecurities, our own fear. The splinter in our brother's eye is the small, surface-level fault that we are so quick to notice and condemn. Our obsession with the splinters of others is often a sophisticated defense mechanism, a way to avoid the much more daunting and painful work of looking at our own plank. We appoint ourselves experts on the lives of others to avoid having to be beginners in our own. The story is a profound call to humility. It urges us to withdraw our projections, to call off the external war, and to turn our attention inward first. It is only when we have done the work of clearing our own vision that we can hope to see the world and others with any real clarity or offer any real help. It is vital to understand that this practice of non-judgmental acceptance is not the same as passive agreement or apathy. It does not mean you approve of harm or turn a blind eye to injustice. Acceptance is not agreement. Acceptance is the first step of seeing reality clearly, before we layer it with our own emotional reactions and stories of how it should be. It is the ability to see what is, without the immediate filter of what I think about what is. This clear seeing is the essential foundation for any wise and effective action. When your mind is not clouded by the heat of your own righteousness and anger, you can respond to a difficult situation with immense skill, compassion, and wisdom, rather than simply reacting blindly. Letting go of the habit of judgment is like finally removing a painful thorn that has been stuck in your eye for years. Suddenly, the world appears less irritating, less aggressive, less flawed. In truth, the world has not changed at all. It is your vision that has been healed. You stop actively searching for what is wrong, and in doing so, you create the space to notice what is right. You stop filtering your experience through the narrow, dark lens of critique, and you begin to perceive the simple, unadorned beauty that was always present. When the harsh voice of the judge finally falls silent, we begin to hear a much quieter, more joyful music. We create the fertile ground in our own hearts for happiness, contentment, and a deep appreciation for the simple goodness of life to arise. Having asked the inner judge to leave the house of the mind, we find ourselves in a new kind of silence. The constant, grating noise of criticism and comparison has subsided, and in its place, there is a sense of spaciousness. For the first time, perhaps, we can look upon the world and upon ourselves not with a critical eye searching for flaws, but with a quiet, open curiosity. When we are no longer filtering reality through the narrow lens of what is wrong with it, we create the possibility of finally noticing what is right. This shift from a mindset of scarcity to one of abundance, from critique to appreciation, is the cultivation of a quality known as mudita. Mudita is a beautiful and often overlooked concept, typically translated as sympathetic joy or appreciative joy. It is the practice of feeling happiness for others, of delighting in their good fortune. It is one of the four sublime states of mind, considered in this ancient tradition to be among the highest fruits of spiritual development, alongside loving kindness, compassion, and equanimity. Mudita is the direct and powerful antidote to the poison of envy, jealousy, and comparison. Envy arises from the mistaken belief that happiness is a limited resource, a zero-sum game. It whispers that if someone else gets a piece of the pie, there is less left for you. This scarcity mindset is the engine of competition and resentment, trapping us in a constant state of striving and feeling inadequate. Mudita, on the other hand, springs from a deep understanding of abundance. It recognizes that happiness is not a finite commodity to be hoarded. Joy is infinite. The light from another person's candle does not diminish your own. It adds to the brightness of the whole room. To celebrate another person's success, to genuinely feel joy in their happiness, is a revolutionary act in a culture that is so often built on rivalry. It is the ultimate expression of an open heart, a heart that understands its deep connection to all others. The practice of cultivating mudita begins with mindful attention to our own reactions. When you hear that a friend has received a promotion or see a post of a family member on a joyful vacation, what is your first, unfiltered inner response? Often, for many of us, it is a subtle twinge of envy, a quiet thought of, why not me? Or, their life seems so much easier. The first step is to simply notice this reaction with honesty and without judging yourself for it. It is a deeply conditioned, almost universal human reflex. Then, having noticed it, you can make a conscious choice to shift. You can take a breath and deliberately plant a different seed. You can say to yourself, how wonderful for them. May their happiness and success continue. May they be well. You can try, for a moment, to imagine their feeling of joy and allow yourself to share in it, to feel its warmth. In doing this, you transform a moment of potential suffering for yourself into a moment of connection and generosity of spirit. Social media, so often a catalyst for comparison and misery, can become your training ground for mudita. There is a story of a father, a man who had achieved a great deal in his life by conventional standards. He had built a successful career, earned wealth, and garnered the respect of his community. He had known the fleeting thrill of closing a deal, of receiving an award, of buying a new car. But one ordinary afternoon, sitting on a park bench, he experienced something entirely different. He was not striving or achieving. He was simply watching his young daughter play. The little girl, utterly absorbed in her world, saw a dandelion puffball. With a look of pure, unadulterated delight, she plucked it, took a deep breath, and blew, watching the tiny seeds dance away on the wind like a cloud of fairies. And then she let out a peal of laughter, not a polite titter, but a deep, rolling, whole-bodied laugh of pure, uninhibited joy. Watching her, the father felt a wave of happiness wash over him that was so profound, so pure, it eclipsed every single one of his personal accomplishments. His daughter's joy, in its complete selflessness, had become his own. He was not happy for her in a detached sense. He was participating in her happiness. In that moment, he understood that the most profound joy does not come from acquiring something for the limited self, but from dissolving the boundaries of that self and delighting in the happiness that already exists in the world. This practice of appreciative joy is not limited to the good fortune of others. It is also a practice of turning that same warm, appreciative attention to the small, simple, and impermanent pleasures of our own daily lives. For years, the inner critic has been cataloging everything that is wrong, everything that is lacking. Now, with that voice quieted, we can begin to notice the simple goodness that we have been overlooking. This is the practice of finding joy in what is ordinary. It is the conscious recognition of the rich, dark taste of the first sip of coffee in the morning. It is pausing to feel the warmth of a sunbeam on your face on a cool day. It is the simple, profound pleasure of getting into a comfortable bed after a long day. It is the sound of rain on the roof, the kindness in a stranger's smile, the beauty of a piece of music. These are not grand, life-changing events. They are small, fleeting moments of grace. Our minds, conditioned to seek out drama and intensity, tend to dismiss them as insignificant. We let hundreds of these tiny, pleasant experiences pass by each day without notice, while we allow a single unpleasant experience to capture our entire attention for hours. The practice of mudita for oneself is the practice of paying attention to the good. It is the practice of letting these small moments of pleasure land. It is pausing for just a second to acknowledge, "Ah, this is nice." You don't need to cling to the moment or mourn its passing. You simply need to honor it with your awareness. You let it be a small, warm stone dropped into the lake of your being. Our culture often sells happiness as a destination, a grand prize at the end of a long struggle. If you just get the right degree, the right job, the right house, the right partner, then you will finally be happy. The wisdom of mudita reveals this to be an illusion. Happiness is not a place you arrive at. It is a way of seeing that you cultivate moment by moment. True, sustainable contentment is not a dramatic, cinematic crescendo. It is the gentle, steady hum of 1,000 small joys, 1,000 moments of quiet appreciation for our own simple pleasures and for the shared happiness of others. It is the result of a mind that has learned to stop judging and start noticing. This cultivation of joy, this practice of filling our own well with the positive energies of gratitude and appreciation, is not a frivolous luxury. It is an essential part of building a resilient and balanced mind. It provides us with the strength and the warmth needed to face the inevitable realities of life that are not joyful. We have now gathered the tools to work with our minds, to release the past, to face the present with clarity, and to open our hearts to joy. But life, in its ceaseless turning, will always present us with the ultimate challenges to our peace. How does this wisdom hold up in the face of profound loss, deep grief, and the stark reality of our own mortality? It is to this sacred and often feared territory that our journey must now turn. Having learned to open our hearts to the simple, appreciative joy of mudita, we find ourselves better equipped with a quiet resilience and a warmth of spirit. This is essential, for the path of wisdom does not shy away from the difficult aspects of life. It invites us to turn and face them with the same clear-eyed compassion. We now arrive at the most sacred and feared territory of human experience, the ground that our modern culture works tirelessly to avoid, deny, and sanitize. We turn our attention to the great, unavoidable truths of profound loss, of grief, and of our own mortality. To look at death not as a morbid failure, but as a profound teacher, is one of the most vital steps toward finding an unshakable and authentic peace. Our society is built upon a pervasive denial of death. We speak of it in euphemisms, as if saying the word itself might summon it. We hide the dying away in sterile rooms, separate from the flow of life. We invest billions in a desperate attempt to halt the natural process of aging, to maintain the illusion of perpetual youth. This deep-seated fear is the ultimate expression of our clinging. It is the ego, the illusion of a solid, separate self, screaming in protest against its own dissolution. It is the fierce grip of upadana on the concept of me. But this denial does not free us from fear. It only forces the fear underground, where it festers, becoming the source of 1,000 smaller anxieties about our health, our security, and the unstoppable passage of time. By refusing to look at death, we refuse to look at life as it truly is. In stark contrast, many of the world's wisdom traditions, including Buddhism, teach that the regular, mindful contemplation of our own mortality, a practice known as maranasati, is one of the most powerful, life-affirming practices we can undertake. This is not about becoming morbid or depressed. It is about waking up. When you live with a gentle, consistent awareness that your time on this earth is finite and uncertain, your priorities undergo a radical and clarifying shift. The trivialities that consume so much of our energy, the petty arguments, the social slights, the pursuit of statusaire revealed in their true insignificance. You stop wasting your precious, unrepeatable days on things that do not truly matter. Your life gains a sense of urgency and purpose. You are motivated to love more fully, to forgive more easily, and to be more present for the people and experiences that give your life its real meaning. Furthermore, the awareness of death is the ultimate catalyst for gratitude. It is only against the dark backdrop of our mortality that the vibrant colors of life become so astonishingly beautiful. When you know that this day, this breath, this conversation is a gift that will not be repeated, you stop taking it for granted. Each sunrise becomes a quiet miracle. The taste of fresh water, the sound of a loved one's voice, the feeling of your own body breathing all of it becomes infused with a poignant, heartbreaking preciousness. The contemplation of death does not diminish life. It makes it sacred. There is a simple and profound story told of an old master and a young novice walking through a forest in the heart of autumn. The ground was a breathtaking carpet of gold, crimson, and orange leaves. The air was crisp and carried the scent of damp earth. The young novice, however, felt a wave of sadness. "Master," he said quietly, "it is beautiful, but it is also so tragic. All of these leaves are dying. Soon the trees will be bare and cold." The old master stopped and bent down, picking up a single, perfectly formed maple leaf, a blaze of golden light in his palm. "You see this leaf as dying," he said, his voice soft. "But the leaf itself does not see it that way. For its whole life, it has served the tree. It has drunk the sunlight and breathed the air. It has danced in the wind and provided shade. Its work is now done. It is not dying, it is returning." He let the leaf fall from his hand, and it drifted gently back to the forest floor. "It will now become part of the rich earth that will feed the roots of the very tree that gave it life. Its substance will nourish the new leaves that will be born in the spring. Do you see? It is not an end. It is simply a change of form. The leaf is not afraid, because it knows that it has never, for a single moment, been separate from the tree." This parable is a beautiful teaching on anicca and anatta in the face of death. We, like the leaf, are part of a larger process. We arise from conditions. We live for a time, and we return to those conditions. Our fear comes from our mistaken identity as a separate, isolated leaf, terrified of letting go of the branch. But when we understand ourselves as an inseparable part of the great tree of life, the fear begins to soften. We are like a wave rising from the ocean. The wave has its own unique shape and journey for a time, but it is never anything other than water. When it crashes on the shore, the wave dies, but the water is not lost. It simply returns to its source. To understand this is to understand that death is not the annihilation of our being, but a transformation of our form. This wisdom can also guide us through the painful reality of grieving the loss of another. These teachings do not ask us to be cold or to not feel sorrow. Grief is the natural, healthy, and necessary expression of love. The more deeply we love, the more deeply we grieve. The pain of absence is real, and it must be honored. But there is a difference between clean pain and muddy suffering. The clean pain is the pure ache of missing someone. The muddy suffering is the extra layer we add with our clinging to the past, our desperate wish that reality were different, our belief that our happiness has been permanently destroyed. Wisdom allows us to hold the clean pain of grief in a vast, compassionate space. It allows us to weep for the loss of the form while still cherishing the love that remains. It allows us to be grateful for the time we had, knowing that all time is borrowed and all things are impermanent. It helps us to hold the immense pain without being completely shattered by it. Ultimately, the best preparation for a good death is a good life. You do not begin to train for this final act of letting go when you are on your deathbed. You train for it every single day. With every small irritation you let pass, you are training. With every old resentment you forgive, you are training. With every moment you choose to be fully present instead of lost in thought, you are training. By living each day with kindness, with awareness, and with an open heart, you are preparing yourself for the ultimate release. If you have truly lived, without leaving a heavy residue of regret, then when the moment comes to let go of this life, it is not a terrifying failure. It is simply one last, natural exhalation, an act of returning for which your entire life has been the perfect, patient rehearsal. We have now traveled from the depths of our own restless minds to the great universal truths of existence. We have diagnosed our suffering, understood its roots in clinging and ignorance, and gathered the tools of mindfulness, compassion, and wisdom. We have learned to find joy in the simple and to face loss with courage. We have, in essence, assembled all the pieces of the map. The final task that remains is to see how to use this map to walk in the world, how to integrate all of this understanding into a balanced, sane, and beautiful way of living our ordinary modern lives. It is to this art of walking the path that we now turn. We have traveled a long and profound road together. We began in the quiet desperation of a sleepless night, feeling trapped by the relentless pressures of modern life. We journeyed through the foundational truths of existence, the pervasive unsatisfactoriness of dukkha, the relentless flow of impermanence, anicca, and the elusive, empty nature of the self, anatta. We have examined the mechanism of our own suffering through the lens of clinging, and we have brought the light of awareness to our relationship with the past, the future, our thoughts, our emotions, and even our own mortality. After such a deep exploration, a crucial question naturally arises: what now? How do we live this? Must we renounce the world, retreat to a cave, and become a perfect, emotionless ascetic to find this peace? The answer, which lies at the very heart of this wisdom, is a compassionate and resounding no. The path is not one of escape. It is the art of engagement. It is the path of balance, known as the middle way. The concept of a middle way can be misleading. In our culture, middle often implies a bland compromise, a lukewarm 50-50 split. But the middle way is not a weak or passive position. It is a dynamic, razor-sharp path of wisdom that actively navigates between two unproductive and painful extremes. These are two extremes that the Buddha himself experienced and ultimately rejected. The first extreme was his early life as Prince Siddhartha, a life of radical self-indulgence. He was surrounded by every imaginable pleasure-fine silks, exquisite food, beautiful music, constant entertainment. He was shielded from all evidence of sickness, old age, and death. He had everything the material world could possibly offer. Yet, he found that this endless pursuit of sensual pleasure did not lead to lasting happiness. It only led to a deeper thirst, a more profound sense of emptiness. It was a path of chasing fleeting highs that inevitably left him feeling unsatisfied. So, he abandoned that life and swung to the opposite pole, the extreme of radical self-mortification. For 6 years, he lived as a wandering ascetic, subjecting his body to the most severe hardships. He practiced extreme fasting until his ribs showed through his skin, He held his breath until he felt violent pains in his head. He slept on beds of thorns. He believed, as many did at the time, that by punishing the body, he could liberate the spirit. But this path also failed. It brought him to the brink of death, but no closer to enlightenment. He found that torturing the body only served to weaken the mind, making clarity and insight impossible. He was just as obsessed with his experience, just as caught in a cycle of suffering, as he was in the palace. He was simply clinging to pain instead of clinging to pleasure. It was only when he collapsed from exhaustion and accepted a simple bowl of milk rice from a village girl that he had his great breakthrough. He realized that both extremes were dead ends. The instrument of awakening the human mind and body needed to be healthy and functional. You cannot discover the truth if your mind is clouded by sensual obsession, nor can you discover it if your mind is weakened and agitated by physical deprivation. The true path, he discovered, lay in the middle, not a compromise, but a path of exquisite balance. This was the middle way. There is a beautiful story that perfectly illustrates this principle. One of the Buddha's monks, a man named Sona, had been a famous lute player before joining the order. He was practicing meditation with a fierce, almost violent effort, walking back and forth until his feet were raw and bloody. Yet he was making no progress and was growing deeply discouraged, considering giving up the monk's life altogether. The Buddha, perceiving Sona's struggle, came to him and asked, "Sona, is it true that in your lay life you were skilled at playing the lute?" "That is true, Lord," Sona replied. The Buddha then asked, "Tell me, Sona, if the main string of your lute was stretched too tightly, would it produce a beautiful and harmonious sound?" "No, Lord," said Sona. "It would sound sharp and jarring, and it would be very likely to snap." "And what if the string was too loose?" the Buddha continued. "No, Lord," Sona said. "It would produce only a dull, muffled sound, or no sound at all." "So what is required, Sona, to create beautiful music?" The young monk replied, "Lord, the string must be tuned just right. It must be not too tight and not too loose. It must be balanced." The Buddha smiled. "Just so, Sona, and it is the same with the spiritual path and with life itself. If your effort is too strained, your mind will become agitated and you will find no peace. If your effort is too slack, your mind will become dull and fall into complacency. Your energy, your attention, your very life must be tuned like the string of that lute. It must be balanced. That is the middle way. This ancient wisdom is not just for monks. It is the art of living a sane and meaningful life in any circumstance. It is the art of tuning the instrument of our own lives. In our work, the middle way navigates between the tight string of obsessive, stressful workaholism and the loose string of cynical apathy. It is the path of working with diligence and integrity, finding meaning in the process, while letting go of a desperate, ego-driven attachment to the results. In our emotional lives, it navigates between the tight string of being completely hijacked by every feeling and the loose string of numbing ourselves and denying our emotions. It is the path of allowing ourselves to feel everything fully and cleanly without being swept away. In our relationships, it steers between the tight string of desperate, codependent clinging and the loose string of fearful, isolated withdrawal. It is the path of loving deeply and connecting authentically while honoring the freedom of ourselves and others. In our modern world, it guides our relationship with technology and information, steering between the tight string of mindless, addictive consumption and the loose string of a fearful rejection of the world. It is the art of using all of life's tools with mindfulness and intention. The middle way, therefore, is not a beginner's course. It is the masterful expression of the entire path. It requires the constant, gentle application of mindfulness to know when we are becoming too tight or too loose. It requires the wisdom of anicca and anatta to not cling to outcomes or to a fixed idea of ourselves. It requires the compassion of metta and karuna, both for others and for ourselves, when we inevitably fall out of balance. It is not a fixed line, but a dynamic, fluid dance. It is the art of living with an open hand rather than a clenched fist. Our journey began with a mind at war with itself, trapped in a world it perceived as hostile and overwhelming. We have traveled through the deepest understandings of reality gathering the tools of awareness, wisdom, and compassion. We have arrived here at a path that is not about escape, but about skillful, beautiful, and balanced engagement with life as it is. We now have the complete map. We understand the landscape, we know the destination is peace, and we have been shown the art of how to walk. Now, all that is left is to take a final look back at the entire journey, to distill its most essential message, and to empower ourselves to take the first, simple, courageous step on this beautiful path home. Our journey began in the deep quiet of a sleepless night. With the weight of a world that felt solid, permanent, and overwhelming, we began with the feeling of being trapped in a story of anxiety and lack, a story that felt as if it would never end. We have traveled far since then, through the ancient landscapes of the mind, exploring the nature of our own experience. We have seen that the world is a flowing river of impermanence, that our sense of a solid self is a fleeting illusion, and that our suffering is born from the simple, tragic act of clinging to the banks. Let us return, now, to that quiet room. It is 3 in the morning again. The same person lies in the same bed. From the outside, nothing has changed. The challenges of their life, the demands of their job, the complexities of their relationships, they are all still there. And perhaps even a familiar feeling of anxiety arises, a ghostly echo of the past. But something is profoundly different. The person is no longer completely lost in the storm. They are no longer convinced that they are the storm. Instead, there is a space, a quiet stillness that can watch the storm rage without being destroyed by it. They can feel the energy of anxiety in their body and know, with a deep and certain wisdom, this too shall pass. The feeling is no longer a solid wall, but a passing cloud. The story is no longer a prison, but simply a story. The journey has not been one of escaping life, but of finally learning how to live within it. It has been a journey from being the prisoner of our experience to becoming the compassionate witness of it. This, then, is the heart of the path. Peace is not the absence of problems, it is the presence of a spacious awareness that can hold those problems with grace. It is not a final destination you arrive at once. All of life's seas are calm. It is the art of learning to sail your ship skillfully in any weather. The teaching that nothing lasts forever is not a sad declaration of cosmic nihilism. It is the most hopeful and liberating promise in the universe. It means that your pain is not a life sentence. Your grief is not a permanent state. Your confusion is not your final identity. And because joy, too, is impermanent, every moment of it becomes a precious, unrepeatable gift to be cherished. This simple truth is the key that unlocks both our resilience in times of sorrow and our gratitude in times of happiness. You do not need to become someone else to walk this path. You do not need to go anywhere else to find this peace. The tools have been with you all along. They are as close as your own body, as immediate as your own breath. Freedom is not something you must acquire. It is something you uncover by gently letting go of the struggle, the resistance, the relentless clenching of the mind. It is about returning home to the quiet, open awareness that has always been your true nature, beneath the noise of 1,000 passing thoughts. It starts now, not tomorrow, not when you feel better, not when your life is in order. It starts in this very moment, with the simple, profound act of taking one conscious breath, feeling the air enter your body and feeling it leave. It begins with noticing a single thought and letting it go without judgment. The journey of 1,000 miles and the journey to profound peace both begin in exactly the same way, with a single, simple step.